Go live. I know, Raleigh. Hello, everyone. Hello. So, I have a poodle waiting outside the door, but... Up. Come. Up you come. Up you come. Hello. Oh, up you come. The local Corgi Revolutionary. Corgis for freedom! Corgis for food! You don't feed us! We'll revolutionize you! I've come to say hello. They have now been fed and are no longer seeking the Corgi rule of the world for this precise moment. For a few moments. Give them a few minutes and they'll probably change their minds. Hello, everyone. Sorry we're late. Charge of the Corgis! I don't know. Hello, Bob Fry. Why were as late as World War II some guns still using projectile weights expand a 2-pound act as size segment from ball loaf? Was it due to the original date of manufacture? Half and half. It was also due to the transition time, because it took a while for people to transition from weight of shot to size of gun. People knew what you were talking about, so it didn't really matter. Most of the people around knew exactly what a 2-pounder was, knew exactly what a 6-pounder was, and all that sort of thing. So you knew what you were looking for was a 76mm or a 40mm gun. I'm just going to go back to the beginning of the chat to say hello to him. Hello, Peter Dawson. Hello, George Newman. Oh, good lord. You coming in as well now? Oh, hello. Hello. So, yes, we also now have a poodle who's joined us to say hello. Or rather, to come in demanding a biscuit. Hello, Knights of Front. Hello, Michael Cooch. Hello, Dea Brock. Hello, Runon. Hello, Byron Newman. Oh, hello, History Vanguard. Hello, John Shea. Hello, DH89. Hello, Albozeski. Hello, Tanverga. Hello, Stafford. Hello, you. Hello, Blackburn Maximus. Hello, Stephen Richards. Can I stretch? I need to move the scroll. Do you want up in my lap? Oh. Hello. Yeah, never let anyone presume that you guys do not run the house. Hello. Ooh, everyone. Let's see. Seneca Nero. Hello, Jack Ray. Hello, Steve Clarke. Hello, Amelia Brother. Hello, Bug829. Hello, Just Vonk. Hello, Bob Fry. Hello, Leslie Mitchell. Hello, David Goulding. Hello, Carl Gusberg. Hello, Andy. And hello, Shane. Hello, everyone. Yes. Hello. Yes, Raleigh says hello to you all as well. Zebedee came in to just say hello. Raleigh came in to say hello and get biscuits. And hugs. You come in for all. You want it all, don't you? Oh, hello. Oh, hello. You're back again. There we go. All right. Yeah. All right. Okay. Hello. Oh, hello. Hello. Yes. But I need to see the screen. I need to see the screen. Excuse me a second. Thank you. Oh, right then. 96 everyone. I think you had a load of questions for you. I will get to them. So if the German Emperor Frederick had not died 99 days after taking the throne, leads to World War I, with German, British, Italian, and Ottoman Empire, Japan, versus the Austria and Hungary, and Russian Empire, China, leading the French taking British colonies in West Africa, Egypt. How are the French taking the colonies and British colonies in West Africa and Egypt? Where are they getting the troops from to do this? Where are they getting the naval force from to do this? And Emperor Frederick had not died, unless this way, I doubt there's a war, because he's very much less warlike than his son, Kaiser Wilhelm. In fact, he would probably change the German system very much, which was the main thing in Ess's way. That meant that he was, to an extent, brought down by Bismarck. who was constantly trying to countermand him by feeding into his son's ego. The trouble is, Bismarck created a demon from which he couldn't himself control. How are they losing these things? So, you've got... If you've got Germany, Britain, Italy, and the Ottomans on one, and Japan on one side, versus, well, Austria, you're not going to be versus Austria-Hungary, so the nicest way, that one's going to sign up with the Germans, whatever, so you can take that one out of the mix. And so that means you're going to somehow, the British and Joes are somehow going to keep the Italians and Austro-Hungarians from fighting each other. The French get mullered in that one. The Russian Empire collapses. Spain, what do they matter? They've got nothing at that point. And China, again, it's in the nicest way that there's just... The scenario, for it that to all happen, you would have to have... None of it would happen. Because, not even in the fetishized dreams of anyone, you'd have to write a very fictional book where basically, a scenario where the British were basically mucked up everything. Because, again, how did the Austro-Hungarians and the Germans not ally with each other at that point? They liked Emperor Frederick. He was nicer. They preferred him to Kaiser Wilhelm. Picking up from Twitch, if the RM was able to get the quad turrets working, are there any navies that wouldn't be wearing the brown pants? If you've got the 14-inch auto quad turrets working, and you've managed to put 3 of them on each of your battleships, then that's going to create a very interesting perspective on people. Because honestly, at a certain point, someone's going to go, right then, well, the only thing you can do up with get that is try and get 4 triple 16-inch turrets working on auto, and then try and push that up. And that's what's going to happen. It's just going to elevate it. So, yes, there's going to be people worried about it, but they're soon going to try and work on their own, because once one person's doing it, the rest are going to try and do it. Hello. No, you... Oi. Oh. Hello. Oh. Hey, by come. Oh, yeah. Hello. Ow! Oh, those pots are attached. Thank you. You do realise if I move my arm in any way, shape or form, you fall on the ground? You don't care, do you? At all. No, you're getting patted. That's the important thing. Poodles. I don't know. Seriously. Yeah. Oh! Again, that bit's attached! That bit's attached too! You want to, after basically mild assault and battery, you want a biscuit. Ay, caramba. Ay, caramba. Good. Well, we hope so, History Vanguard. We will hope it will get sorted out. Right then, that goes to there. Because I'm having Iron Brewing this afternoon's thing. Hello, the ugly Steve. He looks bigger than you, Alex. Here's the trick. If I do stand up, and I have been quite honest about my height, and I move my chair to one side. This is the thing, because usually when I tell people I have a poodle, people go, oh, small dog then. And I have to explain this. Hup, hup. Hello. So when he's standing up on his hind legs, he comes in at shoulder height. Hello. It's fun. It's fun. You're not a small dog, are you? You have no concept of this people who could declare whenever I say I have a poodle, you are a small dog. They just look, you just think they're insane, don't you, Fluff? Hello, you're coming around that side now. I'm not sure which side it's safer to have you on, honestly. That side you're between me and the Iron Bro. Good boy. Right. Who's rewarding who? Who knows? Blackburn Maximum. The F3 styled 10k heavy cruiser with 3 quad 8-inch guns, 8-inch armor, and 28 knots, possibly in 1926 British. With 3 triple 8-inch guns. Probably not 8-inch armor, probably 4.5 to 5 inches of armor. And probably would be about aiming for 30 knots, but yeah, it's possible. And you could have the aircraft hanging off the rear. They don't really cost that much. If you need a rescue strike, Team Sam will blink SOS in Morse. One eye, dot, both eyes, dash. This is the... No, believe it or not, he's called a standard in the UK. In Europe, they call his size giant. In the UK, we have standard. Which is why the standards in the UK range so much in size. Because there's the standards in Europe and America. There's also giants in Europe and America. And in the UK, we just have the standard and everything which is not a toy or a miniature. Which are the 2 other types of poodle. Is called a standard. It's kind of like the standard battleship. Or the standard missile. There's a lot that's covered by that word, which... is nowhere near standardized. That's right. Why did the Empire cruise ship British India? Was it more than just Empire cruise skip British India? Was it more than just because the Iron wanted to build up British Ceylon as airways? That and also what's it going to provide by stopping off in India? What's the benefit? You see, the thing is, British India, they already know how big we are. And there are other ways they can be influenced in terms of by the Royal Navy. But you have a huge British Army presence in India. The British Indian Army. And so you have other forces to display and provide the honour. You don't necessarily have those forces in Ceylon, etc. So the Navy needs to take a bigger image role. If you need to take him back, he has hurt me enough already. Now you're doing things. You probably can't hear this, but our water butt tap has broken today. I won't name who has done it and who has broken it, but it's someone. It's someone. Who will remain nameless. But new tap has been ordered and will be fixed tomorrow. But that means I've got a constant in the background, a dripping tap, or rather leaking tap, which someone is doing a constant run of buckets to, so that the water doesn't just disappear down into the concrete.
Not sustainable.
Hmm?
It's not sustainable for water to disappear into concrete.
Yes, but so is not sustainable breaking washers on taps and also breaking the tap.
Tap jammed.
Yes, so it was broken.
It's been broken.
Yeah, the new one coming's metal.
It worked.
Oh, caramba. Yes, engineers do always break things, although I am not making any comment about the person who broke it. At all. Anyway. I'm getting some iron brew out. Today is going to be a fun one, because today are books inspired by Julian Thompson. So they include things like War Plan Orange. Because guess what? This is very much... The American plan owes far more to the logic and ideas of Corbett than it does Mahan. Which is an interesting one, because I've told you before, the fuller reading of Mahan is far more complicated than it's often presumed, because he's often presumed he's all about battles, and Corbett's all about the other things other than battles, but actually they're a mixture. They're both a mixture of both. But this one is also about relearning lessons for politicians who keep forgetting them. And that is what Corbett is all about, as I tried to explain in the video about him on Tuesday. Corbett is about sometimes stating the blindingly obvious to probably everyone who's interested in naval history about what matters and what you have to do in a naval war. Because he's trying to reteach people who have forgotten and who keep forgetting when you're building up a navy. Because Britain's had naval power for so long, it's just considered something we automatically have, not something we have to think about having. And with the US Navy, they get this wonderful build-up, and then the treaty system hits. And then, again, what are they having to do in the late 1930s? They are having to build up again. They are having to get their politicians to build up again. And they have to go, basically they go, well, they start off by trying the Mahan techniques, and that's not working, because the people turn around and go, well, we have battleships and carriers, so we don't need to worry, do we? And they're sort of looking at each other going, oh, good Lord, there. Hang on. Who was the British guy? Who was the British guy? Corbett! Grab his books. And that's where quite a lot of War Plan Orange and all these war plans come from. They're as much about selling capabilities and making the case for capabilities as they are about planning for war. So we've got War Plan Orange here. We also have, of course, both copies, because I love these copies, of his England in the 7 Years' War, both volumes. We have this book, which you'll remember from the Mahan is Not Enough book, because, of course, this is the proceedings of a conference on the works of Sir Julian Corbett and Admiral Sir Herbert Richmond. So, yeah. And we have this book, Some Principles of Maritime Strategy. I do enjoy this copy. I know some of you have picked up this copy, and it tends to go with the Mahan copy. The fact that they haven't converted Cable's gunboat diplomacy into this format, or Richmond's sea power, the modern sea power, into this format, annoys me, because my only copies of Herbert Richmond's sea power, modern sea power, basically are 1930s issues. So I don't like to loan them out to students. But books of this image I do loan out to students, because if necessary, I buy another one. People often forget, one of the things that's often forgotten is just how much of a university lecturer's salary is spent on making sure you have spare copies of important books, so that when the library runs out and your students go in there going, I can't afford this, or I can't get this, you go, right then, there you go, make sure you return it on time, and remember, I will be grading you based on whether or not the book returns to me in decent format. And this one, Maritime Operations in the Russo-Japanese War, Volume 2. 94 to 95, by Julian Corbett. Now, there are two reasons why this one's here, and I haven't got Volume 1 here. One reason I don't have Volume 1 here is because, honestly, we have 6 books, so I wasn't too bothered about 6 books is what I usually find is a viable number for Bruships. Secondly, is because Volume 1 has done a walkies, and I cannot find it for the life of me, because otherwise I would have shown it to you. But yes, he did 2 volumes of maritime operations in the Russo-Japanese War, which were a secret study done for the Admiralty. And they formed the basis of a lot of Admiralty planning for what would be happening in World War I. Now, the thing is, these were then published in about the 1970s. And so you can read what was literally the Royal Navy getting a historian to write a report on a war. And I can tell you now, although I highly doubt it would be me, but it would probably be a senior historian, academic of certain standing, will be approached at the end of the Ukrainian war, whenever it finishes, to go over the details and write basically a quasi-official history for the Royal Navy to learn and the Ministry of Defence to learn what happened navally in the war, what lessons should be taken away. And in fact, you can almost tell who's auditioning for that role by which big names are keeping disturbingly quiet on the subject of Ukraine. You can sort of tell, because the rest will all be making noise, because that's what they'll be wanting. Sort of, they'll be their cachet is going to be making noise and getting books published. The ones who don't get books published, and every navy will be following a similar policy. Every government, every army, every air force will be following a similar policy. The big names, academic names who aren't talking about Ukraine at the moment will be the ones who will then be writing books like this, which will probably be hidden in British government archives for about next 70-odd years, and then will come out. And you'll be able to buy a copy of them 70 years afterwards. Please, the July suggestions, I'm going to make a Patreon page go live while I'm away in June for you all to put suggestions up. And then I will do a vote at some point in June as well, so they're all ready for when I come back in July. Nathan, I asked you Thursday why the British decided to scuttle IJ and Taco, and why the Kingston valve and explosives not enough to put Taco on the bottom. A 6-inch gunfire was needed. Given the damage she'd already required, she had was repairable. So, did you look up why? Basically, it was time. They wanted to make sure she went down very quickly. They didn't want to hang around with her, and they didn't want to try and get her in. So it's time. They just decided to try and speed up the process. And they decided 6-inch shells would speed up the process by making worse or any damage she'd already received. Mike Arrow, Admiral King was somewhat critical of the British. Yes, he was, but that didn't mean he wasn't prepared to use Corbett. He liked Corbett. He'd met Corbett. Admiral King disliked the British and British mainly because of the experience of people like Admiral Beatty. But there were a few British people he had a great, sincere respect for them. One of them was Somerville, another one was Cunningham. The ones he had absolute respect for, he would do whatever needed to be done to look after. When Somerville was ill in America after he'd been appointed naval attaché and after he managed to make friends to extent with King, King made sure he got... There was a dispute over to which hospital Somerville would be sent, and Somerville found himself in the United States Naval Hospital, being looked after there, and there was... he was seen by the most senior doctors available, and when he asked why he was getting so much treatment, was it Roosevelt, etc., they were told, no, sir, Admiral King told us that if anything happened to you, he would be having meetings with all of us. I think the message had the point to be made. I imagine the Soviets did the same with the Falklands. It's not it'd be unsmart not to. Yeah. And I'm sure there is somewhere in the UK, there is, along with the official history put together by Lawrence Fleuryman, there is the official histories put together at the time. There is a small difference in those. One will be the secret official history, which will be the one which has access to all the hidden information. And let's be honest, Lawrence Freeman's one, well, the first draft was... even he admits had issues, because, honestly, he hadn't been given that full access to all the people. And then second, when he did a revised draft, and he basically went and found all the people who he'd got wrong in the book, who were still alive, including people like Commodore Michael Clapp, who he'd completely forgotten existed in the book because he hadn't realised they did, and rewrote it and included all their details. Listen, if the British have been in position to take Niger and Tako as a war prize, what do they use for it? Nothing. She'll probably get scrapped. Maybe, probably they make a reel about how they've captured her, but honestly, they probably don't bother much with her. What use is she at that point in the war? What use is... The Royal Navy has enough times crewing the ships they have at that point in World War II. They are rapidly churning through ships and taking ships out of commission to crew the new ships coming online. They are not going to want nor be bothered with something like the Tako. British backyard shed events of hovercraft 1937. That's the thing. The hovercraft was sort of around by 1937. It just wasn't practical. But if you're talking about making a practical hovercraft by 1937, how does that affect World War II? Expect the landings to be pretty different. Very pretty different indeed. Why is it half my family's realizing Sweden won the Eurovision now? I will have to sort that out live, a bit. I will have to sort that out at some point. Jack Wright, gunnery target? But that's what they used it for anyway, let's be honest. Normally Asia with hovercraft would be decidedly one-sided affairs. They would certainly make things more interesting. That's right. Why are the Revenge class considered cheaper than the Queen Elizabeth? As the Revenge class super cost 13 million in 13.19, well, 13.2 million really to build, and the Queen Elizabeth class super dreadnought cost 13.5 million to build. Well, you know, in my experience, politicians get very obsessed over small amounts of money, but if you consider that across 8 ships, that's a saving of 2.4 million versus building 8 more Queen Elizabeths. Or 8 improved Queen Elizabeths, as they probably should be. I am with the why does anyone care who won Eurovision contest. Actually, no, I'm not. There was one person. I wanted Australia to win. Now, I had a reason for that. If you look at the frontman of the Australian act, and you compare him side by side with in picture with Gareth, aka Gary S. the Brit, if you follow him on Twitch, they look identical. I mean, Gareth doesn't have the hair, but, you know, with a decent wig, he could be the same person. And I was planning on using that while we were in Australia, as long as he gets to Australia. We need about another $4,000, I think, to get him to Australia. Listen, well, the jump between the 13.5-inch and 15-inch across over 1 million. There's also a bit of a speed jump going on if you check the details. Basically, when the ships go up, they tended to not just go up with their guns went up in price, but also their armor would go up and various other things would go up, which would make them all overall more expensive. James, neat. Julian Corbett is on Project Gunman, so in my price range. Excellent. Australia winning Eurovision would be cool. It would be cool. Oh. Oof. Okay, I'm not gonna need to close my window at one point because I keep hearing dripping water. The Rocks being about 3,000 ton less steel than the Queen Elizabeth, what's the factor? Well, they're also a more efficient design because they're designed entirely around being oil-fired ships. You have to remember the Queen Elizabeth were going to be coal-fired and then were made oil-fired, which led to inefficiencies in their structure. So, which actually were reasons for those inefficiencies were one of the reasons why they had so much more space than the R's, which was actually one of the reasons why they were then so much more easy to upgrade than the R's. Swings and roundabouts. Swings and roundabouts. This is the point of naval history and naval design. There is always a swing and a roundabout. And sometimes there's both in the same meeting. Now, I was getting some iron brew out, wasn't I? Yes, that was getting iron brew out before I began the books, because I have been talking so much today, my voice is starting to die. Already. So, I'm kind of naughty, because today, I must admit, I turned my fridge on its lowest setting. Sometimes I turn it off, because I don't like the point. There's enough Cornish and Scottish in me that the idea of keeping the fridge on the whole time, to just provide chilled drinks for myself, seems a little naughty. Besides, it keeps them quite cool anyway, if not chilled. But today I turned it on for a bit, and on its lower setting to chill it down. It's nice. Black Bear Maximum. So Queen Elizabeth having all 5 boilers from the top would have been more efficient design. Yes, and they might have actually been faster on the same power. That's usually the point where it scares you. But think about it. If you're designing a hull for bunker storage of coal, it's going to be a slightly different shape than what you can achieve by being oil-fueled storage. So if you think about it, you'd be talking about a Queen Elizabeth length hull, probably an R-class shaped hull, with the power of a Queen Elizabeth class. So you would be talking about something which is probably a 26-knot battleship. And that itself would have been interesting enough. Because you take on... The Queen Elizabeths have a theoretical speed of 25 knots, practical speed of 24 knots. As a group. And let's be honest, if you'd made that 26 knots as their practical speed, and some of the others being sort of they're being able to vary between 26 and somewhere between 26 and 26.5 knots in top speed, then suddenly that would make life a little bit more interesting at Jutland, etc. Because you add on those extra 2 knots to their movement. They're that much faster on the run south, and that much faster on the run north. Which means they're probably that much closer to the battle cruisers. I am never quite sure why, whenever I have a live, my sister decides to rebuild the entire garden. If anyone could explain it to me, I would like to understand it. 96831, you never hold back, which is one of the reasons I like having you in the chat. You make my life complicated sometimes, because you sometimes ask a lot of questions and I have to work out in which order I'm supposed to answer them, but that's usually because the YouTube somehow gets the questions in the wrong order, and I'm going, hang on, I think that one should have come before that one, and that one should have come before that one. I'm always tempted to say that you should start numbering your questions, so it makes my life easier, but there again, that would kind of restrict your flow, so life is what it is, basically. Let me write this one in. By Edward S. Miller. Sorry, I didn't... Because I was dealing with the Corgi Revolution, I didn't get a time to type this up as I normally do beforehand. Now, there is something I have been meaning to talk to you all about before we sort of start going into too much detail, and one of those things is the trip to Australia. And by the trip to Australia, I mean we have the same fun as we had planned for Canada. We're going to need some help. In terms of, we're going to need some people locally to help us set up the dinners, which we had, which were a lot of fun. I.e., people like the wonderful Stafford, and Wayne, who last time took on and sorted out things and basically made sure that there was a venue that would assist, that was booked. They were the local number that sorted it all out, get it all set up, and everyone could congregate. And it made principally my life, because I'm the one who seems to. Well, I compensate for the fact that I am probably financially the least viable to go away by doing the admin work. That's my way. The others don't make me and don't see it that way at all, but it makes me feel like I'm contributing more if I take on the admin stuff. And yeah, so I basically need some assistance. I'm going to put up the details in a second, and I'll be asking for help. Six, 7, 8, 9, 10, part 11. There you go. Save. Did you pay a cheese tax at a Corgi? We did pay something to the Corgi. Wasn't quite cheese tax, but it wasn't far off it. Austrip. There you go. So, as you can see, we are planning a dinner for Perth on the 6th of June. We are planning a dinner for the 10th of June in Melbourne. We're planning a dinner for the 13th of June in Brisbane. And a dinner for the 18th of June in Sydney. And the 23rd of June in Canberra, if anyone fancies seeing me. Because I think at the moment it's me, and if we do raise the money, it's Gareth coming to get to Canberra. Otherwise, it's just me on my own. But if anyone is interested in helping us with organise those, we would be lovely, very much appreciative, and we'd love to meet everyone if they'd like to. It wasn't me typing quietly for that long, hopefully. So, your sister, sabotage? My sister never sabotages anything. Just, I wind my sister up. She's dyspraxic. And sometimes forgets her own strength when she's doing things. But yeah, so there's that. Did you pay the cheese tax to the Corgi? Corgi can't have cheese. He had the sausage tax. Emu Crime Syndicate, don't worry, we've already pledged our fealty and loyalty to the emus. That's right. Can you see why the Americans couldn't get both the 16-armed Lexington battlecruiser and the 12-inch armed Alaska class large cruisers? Could see the Americans get both? Well, yeah. In the nicest way, they'd have the Lexingtons, but as a scale-up, they might well decide to build the Alaskas as well. Especially if they wanted to pair up the Lexingtons with something else to back them up. So that would make a quite good team if you consider a modernised 16-inch Lexington and a 12-inch armed Alaska to basically organise each other, especially if you could pair them up with Yorktown. That then becomes a very interesting task force. Pair them up with Yorktown, maybe... If you manage to get them, a Yorktown and a Wasp. So if you think about it, if you pair up a Lexington battlecruiser, Yorktown, a Alaska class cruiser, and a Wasp together as a 4-ship core group, and then add some destroyers on, you have an absolutely killer task force that can go around most of the Pacific and can basically take out most things it's come across and fight off anything that it can't. I had a bit of rant today at someone who said railways are only for passengers. I then took half an hour explaining why they are logistic systems with freight and passengers are an add-on. I have to explain that a lot when we're talking about railways in various parts of the world, because there are a lot more railways for freight than there are for passengers. Hello, Paul. That's how I will still be in Britain. Maximus, could the British Canal System expand allow for the transit of fair mile D boats and other similar vessels? It was often used to allow the transit of fair mile D boats and other similar vessels. There were quite a few of them moving around at various places, and quite a few of the production facilities for them were off canals. So there were quite a few small yards involved in the construction of things like fair mile Ds, and there are other sister craft and landing craft, etc. And quite a lot of boats were launched into canals and came along canals out to the ports. So yeah, they were. I want to know if they're going to try Vegemite. I've already eaten Vegemite. I don't know about you, but Vegemite in the UK is quite normal. You know, we have Vegemite, we have Marmite, and we have Bovril. And I've got all three sitting in in my shelf on my shelf in the cupboard in our house. Let alone, you know, other options. I've also got some very nice honey. That is literally, and some black cherry jam. That's literally my condiments, sort of my section of jars of things to put on toast, which I don't often have. But you know, when I treat myself to toast, those are my options. But Bovril is also great for mixing into things like steak dishes. Vegemite goes very nicely with chicken meals. If you're making a chicken stir fry and you want to thicken it up, add in some Vegemite. I know it is sacrilege to some, but it works. Out. 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 Out you go. Thank you. I know. Well, it was fair and Raleigh than doing the other option. The other option will be killing the ladybird, because I don't want a ladybird taking up a nest amongst my books. But saying out and it going out was fine. And you do not get... For me doing work, you do not get paid. You didn't do the work, I did it. You think... Luckily they can't see your face, so they can't see you asking them for support. But they probably will support you, knowing my chat, so yes. That reminds me, I have to buy a whole load of biscuits for the dogs, because we're starting to run out. Luckily I buy huge packs. You'd live off these things if you could. These and chicken. Yes, I have. It was interesting. Don't take this the wrong way. I might have it again. I'm not giving it to my mum or sister. I'm not sure what's in it, but it tastes like it should be something they're allergic to. And I had a little bit. A very small amount. Because, you know, I was adding it into something I was cooking. And thought, well, I'll open it, smell it, see. Okay, I'll add a little bit in, see what happens. It's nice. Yeah, that jar will probably last me a long time, judging by the jar of Bovril. What would the British Empire and Imperial Japan do to America if it was part of the side that lost the World War, lost World War I? Probably nothing to the continental America, but I think they would probably lose their protectorates and colonies. So their territories which they have in the Caribbean, they'd lose. The stuff they'd have in the Philippines, etc., they'd lose. The dispute would be over who got what. But honestly, that would be it. It wouldn't be. No one would. No, there's none of these ideas of taking New York or San Francisco or anything like that. And honestly, considering the quite loud volume of people in America who don't like war and don't like aggrandizement, they'd probably end up just reinforcing the idea of people them wanting to stay home and not get involved in world affairs. Japan was one of the few to start passenger dominant rail system due to coastal shipping and history of pilgrim to shrines as Edo era tourism. Trying to cross around crocodile and kangaroo while you're there. Not sure. Might do. Might not. Let's put it this way. It's going to sound strange, but it's not. Because a long time ago, I had a very close female friend who was Australian. I am not as unexposed to Australian cuisine as you might seem, but also I have met enough of their wildlife in various scenarios in terms of the cuddly kind, especially the wallabies and kangaroos, that actually eating them, they are in my head fixed as zoo animals and as wildlife, not food to eat. So whereas I've walked around sheep all day long and never bothered about it, and the same with cows and pigs. Those are somewhat in my mind as something special. But there again, I am often quite happy to try interesting burgers. So we'll see. So in my current UAD game, I got Captain Darrell Hampton. My 35-knot battlecruiser somehow was just sighted going 45 knots. Yep, that would be Darrell Hampton. Now he's taken up residence beneath my feet. You're very cute. Was the UK rail system titled by Luftwaffe? At points it was, but the British have had for many years various territorial army units whose entire existence is to keep the railways running. And they still have them, and they still are equipped and still are kept going. In fact, in a time in the Cold War when they were getting rid of the units which had specialised in coordinating things such as naval gunfire support, they'd actually expanded those units, and they still to this day, as I said, retain those units. And so the British are pretty good at doing rapid fixing of the railway network. Well, the IJNRN might not want Midway Island, but in the nicest way, they wouldn't want the Americans to have it. So it'd probably be given to New Zealand or Australia. Hello. That's what you do with these things. You farm out things you don't want yourself, you farm out to the colonies. You subcontract the management of. Yeah, hello. Oh, good lord. Are you coming up? Hello. I'm starting on the book soon. Hello. Hello. Hello, you're cute. You're fluffy. You're very affectionate today. I'm not sure why. Hello, yes, I need to see the chat. Hello. Oh, by the way, just in case there's anybody who watches, or watching this later, who likes to write the various comments under my chat, under my videos, that they don't like the dogs in my videos, please note, you don't have to write the comment for me to tell you what my responses will be. I like the dogs, so, and in the nicest way, the dogs were here before the YouTube channel was, and trying to train them out of the concept of lap time is beyond anyone. They have got into it. Our laps are theirs. I'm surprised the kangaroo crashed away and emu haven't scared off against the camels. More than likely, they decided the camels are distant relatives who they're adopting. Raleigh is a pub doggo. Both of my dogs are pub doggos. They have both been to pubs on several occasions, and because there are many dog-friendly pubs in the UK, and yeah, they like them. Sis? He's wandering. I'm not sure. Anyway, did the Taiko class suffer from the blast effects issues and in limited fire arc due to the Nelson would have suffered from? Yes and no. Yes and no. You have to remember the limited firing arc is... It becomes more of an impact the shorter the range weapon you've got. So the longer the range gun you've got, the more chance you've got to turn, the longer range away you can spot your opponent, the more chance you have to adapt, turn the position of the ship to be able to target your opponent. And that's what you do. So you soon bring those things into range and sort of effect. The main point that's often made about close-in weapon systems when they're positioned on ships is their range enough to give you time to make that turn? Is their range of engagement, especially as weapons come in at faster and faster speeds? And that's the thing, when you're dealing with a 16-inch gun, the likelihood you're going to be dealing with a ship which is, is, 20 to 30 knots. You're likely to be going at somewhere between 20 and 30 knots. And you're likely to spot them about 50% plus your range away. Ow! Oh. That hurt. That really hurt. Can we stop using, in the nicest way, the parts of your anatomy and my anatomy which are make us the particular gender we are as a springboard? Oh. Hello, Thistle. Sometimes, why didn't the RN build more renowned class starships with great emphasis on air in the outset of war? I know they were hamstrung during the treaties, but come on, the A would have been an A+. Honestly, renowned class would have been cool things if they could have built them. And look, one of the designs looked at for the RN instead of the King George V would have been a triple 15-inch version of a ship which looked not too dissimilar to an enlarged renown. And you can argue that actually the three turret layout chosen for the King George V is a renowned style layout. 2 turrets forward, 1 turret aft. So you can see the renown has a strong effect on British capital ship design in the interwar period and in the run-up to World War II. You couldn't have heard that much. You're still conscious and you can speak. What can I say? I'm slightly inured to it. I've had it happen more often than I care to think. Situation 19. What would be the best way to give you some money? I was just offered postdoctoral position, and my good fortune is your good fortune. Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. And PayPal. Honestly, PayPal is the easiest way. But nicest way, I know postdocs aren't that great, so thank you. But you don't feel you have to. Steve Clarke, in UAD, if cruisers and destroyers are for scouting, and they get out when fired upon with aid of smoke. In UAD, like cruisers and destroyers for scouting. Yeah. Everyone, in my next watch after the stream is to watch 2 King's College London online war studies introduction videos. They should be good. But no, go and have a chat with them. That's always the best. Give me a second. Let's hope the Evo doesn't come back again. Oh, it's getting hot in here. I'm sure the radiator's not on. It is a step up from being a graduate student. It is. Thank you. No, that's a fair analysis. Although the King George V lost out of speed in many replica rounds, was there a happy medium that was missed? The King George V also had a tremendous amount of armor. Ah. I knew there was something I was forgetting. Sorry, I am just checking the radiator, because the radiator controls are now all on my phone. Helpful. For some reason, the radiator turned itself on. Thank you, Jack Ray. Very kind of you. Hey, look, in nicest way, the problem with UAD at the moment is the destroyers. The British destroyers look like, I'm not sure what, maybe French, possibly German. The American destroyers look British. The French destroyers look British in terms of their superstructure. There's just so much weirdness going on. And then there's that light cruiser in the 1940s, and I have no idea where the escort cruiser design comes from. But that superstructure is definitely not British, and neither is that hull. Look up Marcus Faulkner. He'll sort you out. Tell him Alex sent you. Melanie said, it's still dodged. Melanie, how do you dodge it? Whether during or battlecruiser revolution inevitable? Yes. So today's first book, War Plan Orange. Naval 60-40. Imagine the reaction you would get to telling someone 75 years ago in the future you could control the radiator of your phone. My grandfather would have loved it. That man would have been checking every radiator in the house every 20 minutes to ensure that it was the correct temperature. And as for controlling lights with his phone, he would have had a great fun with that. He would have spent his entire life. And by correct temperature, I mean he would decide whether he wants to make people a little bit too warm or a little bit too cold, and he would alter it so they wouldn't know, so they wouldn't realise what was going on. I go, the radio's producing heat, for some reason I'm cold. I don't know why. Click, click. He'd have had so much fun. Ashton. You say the RN don't use state names. How do you just thought the RN do use state names on the Sunt class rescue tugboats? Think what you're talking about, though. Are they battleships? You're talking about rescue tugboats. Think about the Royal Navy in naming. Naming a battleship is also not the same criteria as naming a tugboat. It just isn't. How are you planning to handle the heat of summer in the shed? Open window. That usually works. Plus, June and July. June I'm away in Australia. July I'm at home in the UK. August I'm away for 2 weeks of being a course director for centres. So Basically, I'll survive. No, but he would be thinking on the phone as, yep, it'll be fun. It will be fun. I need to put a reading light in here, don't I? I do need to put a reading light in here. That's something I will do once I get back. I will fit a reading light. The energies of war planners from 1934 through to mid-1937 were devoted to a cautionary Phase 2 drive as far as the Central Carolinas. The armed services produced a volume of studies that constituted the most thorough investigation of any Pacific campaign. And by the way, if anyone hasn't got this book, I highly recommend it. War Plan Orange by Edward S. Miller is one of those unsung books that's really, really useful if you want to understand the entire American war effort in World War II. Their legacies to World War II strategy included doctrines for amphibious landings, naval interdiction strikes, and air battles, criteria for selecting iron targets, policies of bypassing superfluous strongpoints, and keeping the enemy off balance by momentum, and designs for advanced bases. The concept of using Micronesia as a naval highway had appeared in studies of momentary heavens as early as 1907. It had flowered in 1922 when the Navy briefly adopted the William Ellis proposals to establish true fleet bases there. But the thrusters, who reinstated the through ticket in 1923, had demoted mandates occupations to sideshows. In the 1928 plan, the islands were to be taken by second-line regiments with minor naval help between M+105 and M+180. Long after the United States Joint Amphibious Forces would have reached the Joint Armed Forces would have reached the Philippines, and then only for protection of the supply line. The quick movement of 1932 eliminated the operations in Micronesia by presuming that supply vessels could avoid Orange Raiders, even battlecruisers, by sailing on dispersed routes through the South Pacific. I would just love it if they run some of this planning past the Royal Navy, because they'd have been looking at me going, you know, we tried all this in World War One. Were you not watching us in World War One? It didn't work. Convoys, convoys, convoys. And for more efforts, convoys. Stop thinking with your land and start thinking with your brain. Convoys. A hint of the mandate as a primary theatre appeared in the Tentative Fleet Plan 01 of 1933. Admiral Sellers, though still intent on a dash to Mindanao, admitted a very difficult, if not impractical situation, would arise if Orange foreclosed all ports in the Philippines. He would have to halt the fleet in the Carolines, or even the Marshalls, seize the most important bases, and regroup for a stronger advance. Bryant snatched this contingent, fought to propagate an OPNAV directive for a full-blown plan of a mandate campaign. He demanded a program of attacks across Micronesia, with detailed assumptions about sea and air deployments, landing forces and tactics, and erection and defence of bases. When Sellers balked, Op 12 drew up the Royal Road Plan on behalf of the fleet in 1934, fibbing to the Army that it was simply an improved way of fulfilling the joint policy of rapid movement to the Western Pacific. Commander Magruder, stressing the contradiction of the previous Orange Plan's request for both speed and power, finessed the call for the fleet's early arrival in the Philippines by interpreting it as the date shortly after it solved the threat of being cut off by an Orange naval deployment to Central Pacific bases. Now the earliest moment the fleet could safely meet the plan's other condition of being ready to act offensively when it arrived. The through ticket had failed to guarantee the vital element of communications security. It was therefore more glamorous than real, and had to be discarded. Magruder envisioned the Pacific as barricaded by insular defence lines, at which Japan would make successive stands to inflict attrition until it was able to defeat the Blue Navy in battle and compel American withdrawal from the Western Pacific. It's amazing, as if the Americans have worked out the Japanese battle plan. It's just amazing. Now, Rosa, why do we focus historically so much on Orange? They're multiple color-coded war plans. Because Orange was the one for the war with against Japan. All the rest are for various combinations. There's the Rainbow Wars, which presume various alliances. There's War Plan Red, which was the war against Britain. It has beautiful calligraphy. It dates back a long time. It's really It's really good to read. I mean, the actual stylings are just amazing. And the assumptions of being greeted as liberators in Canada are very interesting to read. The Blue mission, restated, was to proceed to Philippines by a progressive movement through the mandates, or as the Joint Board phrased it, to establish a secure line of communications to the Western Pacific by clearing the Marshalls and Carolines and in placing naval bases there. The geography of the Central Pacific would favour the United States in relative distances, forces deployment, and sequence of operations. The Royal Road prescribed serial captures of islands on which Japanese defences, presumably absent before the war, could not be in place more than a few weeks or even days before landings. Blue would commence at Japan's weakest possessions and proceed stepwise to Truk, essentially establishing mutually supportive fleet and air bases along the way. A drive via small islands could be executed with lesser land and air strength and a smaller train than would be needed in a through ticket drive. It would get off to a lightning fast start and finish within 3 months, satisfying the public clamour to do something. The programme was flexible, logical, and sound, even foolproof. Properly managed, it could not be thrown back. War Plan Orange. Now, what was the real reason for the Germans choosing the 11-inch guns for the Deutschlands? They couldn't build anything bigger, either but under treaty limitations really at the time or actual industrial limitations. It's the same reason they're sticking the 11-inch guns on the Scharnhorst, because they don't have the capacity to build anything bigger at that point and they want to build ships. War Plan Maroon was, I think, War with Canada. Yes, War Plan Maroon, if I remember correctly, was War with Canada, where Britain didn't join, for some reason. When they found themselves fighting the Canadians alone, and for some reason the rest of the British Empire didn't get involved. Not sure how that would expect to work out, but maybe Canada declares war on America. And the rest of the British Empire goes, friggin', we're not getting involved in that. Right, now, so I will say, we're 2-0 against the Canadians. Do not assume victory. In the 1920s. Yeah, in the 1920s, Canadian Army officers toured the US as part of their plan for war preparation against the United States. And yeah, the Canadians probably do have some very interesting plans for war against the Americans. 1812 and 1813. Plus, I would add that the Americans did do some very interesting things in the War for Independence, in that they did send some people up there thinking that the Canadians would want independence. And actually, the Canadians mostly didn't want independence, especially not the French Canadians, because they really worried about what their experience would be like if they were left with no British government to defend them from the English Canadians. Oh yeah, 1776. Yeah. You keep attempting to liberate the Canadians, and the Canadians are going, no, we rather like the system we're in. It's just a joyous thing. It's a joyous thing. Every time the Americans try, and it's a case of, yeah! Canada going, we rather like what we're doing. There was a movie about the war between America and Canada. Depending on where that movie was made, it'll be very different. It will affect how approaching reality, how close to reality it is. So, well, that was fun. This morning on Gareth's stream, I had a fox chasing the chickens, and just now there was a red-tailed hawk after them. In a nice way, McDevitt, have you considered putting in some sort of sentry gun? I'm talking about some sort of automated cannon system, because I think you might need it. Just an water cannon, automated water cannon, but, you know, would possibly be sensible. That's right. Would it be fair to blame a treaty that doesn't make sense for the Tycho class being overweight, as had the cruiser tonnage been set to 15 pounds and Tycho actually makes sense? I don't think you can, because I'm fairly certain... Hello? Hello? So, let me explain what's going on. There is a lady who's decided to come and collect a certain poodle for his dinner. Yes, she has. And he's very happy at this idea. But the thing is, whilst he tends to walk up quite happily with me, with her at the moment, he's decided that she is a toy and something to play with. So she has to put him on a lead. The trouble is, if he goes on a lead, the Corgi gets very upset because the Corgi thinks it's Walkie's time and he should also be on a lead, which means she has him bouncing around. And she just came down to put the aforementioned poodle on the lead. And unfortunately the Corgi's escaped and is now running around going, where's my lead? So she's now got to sort out the Corgi. The poodle is on the lead, waiting for you. Good luck. Thank you. He is behaving, broadly speaking. Don't think she's happy. Give me a second while I deal with the small problems going on outside the house, because the mandates are coming from she who must be my maid, aka the Memsard, aka Mum, and I have to find my shoes. Has he nicked my shoes? The cheeky little fluff. There they are. He nicked my shoes. You mind going in here a second? Seven, come on, Seven. I don't know. Oh. Come on, in you come. You come back. Okay, right. Well, I've got you now. So I've got one dog to control. Hello. How is life going? How are you being treated? So, you know, it's well, the dogs have now switched over. Ay, caramba. If you need to give me a lead for another dog, I've got him in here. He's behaving himself beautifully. He is. As you can see, the Corgi is currently sitting up going, hello, what's going on in the world? He's having fun. And the poodle is currently giving my sister the runaround. Shh. Zip. Come to Papa. Come to Papa. Come on. Yeah. Phalanx water cannon? Yes, phalanx water cannon would be good. They would protect all those things. Excuse me a second. Hello. Okay. Why are you so upset? What's upsetting you? Oh.
Hello. I'm well behaved. But I'm not that well behaved, it seems.
Good boy. in answer to who let the dogs out, she's in a bit of a bad mood at the moment. Today hasn't exactly gone right. So please note, she is not normally in that kind of mood. My sister is normally a very happy person, but today everything has gone wrong, and it's one of those days. And it doesn't help that her younger brother is going away at the end of this month for an entire month, and she's going to be left dealing with everything on her own. And it's just dawned on her today that that's going to be rather a lot, because she's just about realizing how much I normally do. If a US-Canada war film was made by Michael Bay, it would be massive robots and explosions. It would be cool. Poland has a 12.7 BMG anti-drone sentry unit. They could usually probably supply you a solution to the problem. That sounds like a good idea. There's also a very nice one made by Raphael in Israel. Very interesting system, which can have a range of armaments put on it, ranging from a 7mm round all the way up to a 37mm round, depending on what you decide is more important, more useful. And also some, if I remember correctly, some very interesting non-lethal options. Beanbag gun rounds, machine-fed, automatic-fed beanbag rounds. I think some net rounds, some anti-drone rounds. It has all sorts of little options. It's really kind of interesting. You can find it on their website. Sort of like a Clarke and Drax visit to Buffalo, but look, our visit to Canada was our visit to America was kind of interesting in that we reckoned that we were crossing a bridge which was probably the site of a previous crossing, and from Canada to America, and B, we were 4 Brits and a Canadian crossing the bridge in a vehicle, and all 5 of us have some knowledge of armed warfare. One in a science fiction and history realm, but the others in various historical and some sort of practical scenarios, and reasonably practical scenarios. And it certainly did add to the frisson of the occasion. So, Mahan is not enough. Now we have dealt with the doggy interruptus. Let's listen to someone from the Royal Military College of Canada. Let's say Donald M. Sherman, page 51. There are quite a few from the Royal Military College of Canada in here. It's one of the things that's often forgotten. Canada does have a very thriving and traditionally very erudite and well thought through training program for their members of their armed forces. It's one of the things you always have to remember about Canada is they have consistently structured their forces to be something that they can expand in wartime relatively easily. So they do spend a lot of time training and educating their professional standing forces, even to this day, to a very high degree. And sometimes you talk to Canadian personnel who will tell you that their training isn't that great, and you listen to the things they're describing and you're going, no, that's actually better than like 75% of NATO receives, if not 80% of NATO receives in terms of training at that level. And they're going, what? But we don't consider it adequate. That's the thing. The more training you do, usually the more training you want to do, and the more training you feel you need. So if you do this much training, you feel you need this much training. But if you do this much training, you feel you need that much training. And if you do that much training, you feel you need this much training, if that makes sense. Imagine, who will pull your mum? That was when my poor mum actually fell onto the floor. because she missed the chair and hit the floor. I remember that, yeah, as well. Oh, that was, let's put it this way. While I'm away, probably my uncle and aunt would have to come help, and that could be interesting. Honestly, there is a very nice neighbour across the road, a very nice gentleman, and there's actually a couple of them who are very nice, who would probably come and help quite happily. The Education of the Navy had its title picked by the publisher. Originally, I had chosen for a title The Pens Behind the Fleet, but my editor thought that sounded too much like a wartime jingle about the girl in the factory who was the girl behind the man behind the gun. I always regretted that I did not stick to the original title, because the people I wrote about may have done many things, but Mahan perhaps accepted they did not accomplish the education of a navy. Despite my conclusion that cleverly dodged the question, this paper will not make good my previous deficiencies. It merely attempts to highlight some of the problems that naval educators must grapple with. Some of these are: A. The personality of the teacher, in this case the Julian Corbett. I'll present a short summary of his personal and cultural background. Then I will discuss his books, more particularly Drake and the Tudor Navy, to account for what reputation he had. This exercise also helps to explain the preoccupation of some naval officers with Corbett, and his preoccupation with the naval service in general. The education of young naval officers, either when they came, direct and young, to the Navy, or through some public or private system of preparation as a prelude to a naval career. It's this kind of education that the participants were talking about in 1902-1903, when they put forward the Selborne scheme. This will be given some attention here. See, there was the whole question of attempting to ensure that senior, or relatively senior naval officers understood the background of their profession, particularly as it embraced sea power as the handmaid of statecraft, or put another way, as dealing with the sublime aspects of the naval profession. It involved teaching strategy in conjunction with history. In this paper, this refers more particularly to the attempt to infuse deep meaning into the teaching at the Naval War Course, especially under commandants such as May, Slade, and Bethel. In some sense, this constitutes the core of Corbett's influence on the Royal Navy's perception of its function. It also involves the narrative of the War Course curriculum and history, the problem of differing perceptions of the task in hand by Corbett, by the college authorities, and by the senior naval people who were the students, and D, the general problem of educating the state, along with the Navy itself, on maritime functions, by writing books, by the exercise of influence, and in light of the imperial factor. E. Some measure of assessment. It is an interesting book, and it's an interesting thought. That's the So the Deutschland class getting 11 guns was not to lessen their shock to other European air powers, were they? No, although it's often dressed up as that, but really, realistically, it's what they can do. Because the nicest way, they've been allowed to maintain the industry to be able to produce 11-inch guns, because that's what they needed for their pre-dreadnoughts. So they were allowed to keep them. But, yeah. No one was bothered because no one of any note had battleships going around which had less than 15 inches or 14-inch guns. So, you know. Oh, you have an 11-inch gun ship. How cute. I'm continuously sad. I didn't have the funds to take down and go meet you guys. You know, there's more of the Galveston class than the museum people. I have to say, there were some really interesting people we did meet on the course. I will say that, and I will say that I was very happily encouraged by the quality of people we met in the museums, etc. But I will also say this. There were some people who were very good. There were some volunteers who were exceptional. And there were some people who almost treated it as just another job. And you could tell that group from the get-go. And they weren't usually the heads of it or anything, but they were sometimes in, unfortunately, very forward-facing positions. and you could almost see the heads who were not, universally in my experience in Canada and America, were not that way inclined, were sitting there going, oh no, I'm going to need to talk to them again. And it was just, you're sitting there going, I can understand you've taken the job because you need to, and that is a worthwhile thing. But there are some organisations for which if you find yourself working, even if it is just a job, there is a sort of expectation that you will go a little bit further. You know, I remember talking to one person on one ship, and I was having a conversation with the team leader who really did know their stuff and was really very good and a volunteer. And another person was listening, and they started asking questions. What were we talking about, basically? And I answered them, and I presumed they must be a new member of staff. And as I walked away, the team leader was walking along me and went, they've worked here for about 2 years. And he went, oh. But, you see, that's the thing. That's humanity. And the vast majority of the staff I met were absolutely excellent. But having people who come with knowledge and passion can hopefully help encourage those who perhaps are just there because it's their assignment, their work, their job, to find something to be passionate about on that topic. Also, Canada is a major Navy training centre. It is. Train hard, fight easy. Sure, Mac, one of the legacies of the British Dominion system is that many of the former nations have focused on creating high-quality expeditionary formations as they did during the war. True. Canada is to this day the backbone of many peacekeeping operations. You will find Canadian staffs being critical and Canadian forces as a whole being critical to many, many of the peacekeeping operations running around the world. And I would often say that Canada is, in a way, is a peacekeeping superpower. And that sounds strange when used like that, but if using a superpower in its phrase as being a power above all others who has influence over and above all others because of their level of commitment to that thing, then Canada is a peacekeeping superpower. So, also, read the chickens. We are considering a stay of the stew pot for the Angry Rooster because you want us both the fox and the red tail. Sounds to me like the Angry Rooster has sort of paid for his life. Perhaps the Angry Rooster is useful because he keeps keeps everything else safe. And permanently angry people can be useful in that regard. They are very good for being alert. I think, why the British, US and France against the construction of Deutschlands? Well, if they'd been massively against the construction of Deutschlands, the Deutschlands wouldn't have happened. But they preferred Germany to have no major naval ships rather than have those. But they were allowed to maintain their pre-dreadnoughts and the super vessels, which will replace the pre-dreadnoughts, which were starting to fall apart. So you let them have it. And once you've let them have the Deutschlands, once you've given them that concession, you've opened the door for other things. Vision. Germany should have built a battleship with 16 11-inch guns. Why? Why? Let's put it this way. Quad turrets, okay? Just no. Maybe 12 11-inch guns. In fact, 12 11-inch guns would have been a pretty scary ship. If you'd done a Scharnhorst, which was 12 11-inch guns, in 4 triple turrets, that would have been a scary vessel. It would have been. Alright, Dr. Clarke, I watch you too much. I was writing this something this week and I unconsciously quoted you verbatim. Helpful. See what I'm doing. My dad was an engineer aboard a Galveston. He had a snitch watching their video about his duty stations. They had every boiler missile identified and didn't ask about our steering. Sounds like he needs to have a visit. Because in my experience, those things... in my experience, those videos, etc., if they are compiled wrong, they will be very upset to know that's being compiled wrong. Permanently angry people. Is this the sole reason of Admiral King being in charge of your ascent? Permanently angry people have a place. It's like... well, most sort of different things have a place in society, and permanently angry people do have a place. Permanently angry people tend, how do I put this, to be the first alert system to anything being wrong, because they're already angry. So if you want to hear what injustices are going to grow, listen to the permanently angry people. Now, some of them will, and some of them won't. But they're going to be the first alert system. They will be. No, second. Do we know why the heavy cruiser Deutschland launched herself while German Chancellor Heinrich Brüning was giving the christening speech? I'm presuming she felt that the speech was going on too long and being boring, so she decided to do something to wake everyone up. Launch herself. I could see the 11-inch gunship working and think of a fully functional belt-fed autoloader. They could, let's put it this way, with 11-inch shells with their weight, you could have done something interesting with that. Remember, why did Navy's battleships between wars go from 4 turret main battery to 3? Treaties. That's it, simple. It's you want to get everything you want, all the increased AA firepower, all the increased sort of secondary batteries, the increased armor, the deck plating to deal with air attacks, all those things. You want to get them in the sense you want to still achieve a certain speed. Something's got to go. And okay, you go from having 8 guns to 9 guns in 3 triple turrets. That works. That's fine. So, next book. England, 7 Years' War. Bing's fleet now considered of 13 on line, including 2 50s, and was formed in 2 divisions, 7 in the van on himself, and 6 in the rear under Rear Admiral Temple West, each flag officer taking station in the centre of his division. Galcianeri had 12, also including 2 50s, but the metal he could throw was distinctly superior to Bing's, and his ships were cleaner, faster, and more fully manned. His organisation was in the Orthodox 3 divisions, himself commanding the centre. For over an hour, the struggle for the weather gauge went on, and no one could tell how it would end. By 12:30, the critical moment had come, and then suddenly the wind shifted to about southwest in Bing's favour. It's no longer possible for Galcianeri to weather the British had with his whole fleet. He was forced to give way, and shortening sail, he signalled to his van to bear up. Otherwise, says Bing, they would have run the risk of being separated, and their line cut by our line. This remark, like so many other things in this much ridiculed action, is full of interest. Few actions have been so much misconceived as their practical significance as that which was about to ensure. And it's been studied almost entirely to see whether Bing did or did not deserve his hard fate. and the unhappy admiral has been stamped as an unfortunate bungler, hidebound in his stereotyped fighting instructions without a spark of tactical initiative. That he was a man devoid of the character that makes a great commander is certain, but the idea that he was not a scientific tactician, fully in touch with the developments of his time, is as certainly an error. The injustice done to him in this way is no doubt due to the belief that naval tactics at this time were stagnant, and Byng had been used to personify that stagnation. But we have only to examine the battle closely with the new lights that are available to see that tactics were developing on normal and continuous lines of progression, that Byng himself was in the forefront of the movement. To begin with, his remark about cutting the French line shows that the idea had not been forgotten, as is always asserted, and it would look as though Byng had been ready to perform the manoeuvre if his adversary had given him a fair chance. Later on, Galtieri, in his turn, did get such a chance. He attempted to the manoeuvre, and it was parried by a movement of Byng's. The truth is that the ordinary idea of breaking a line was still quite familiar to the naval officers, but it had come to be regarded as too hazardous a movement for the early stages of an action. Doubling, or rear, or rear, or van, was a great favour as a method of concentration, and especially with the French. And it was to prevent this being done that admirals at this time attached so much importance to opening with a rigid line extending the whole length of the enemies. It was not that no other method of attack, such as the general chase, was regarded as legitimate in its place, but between equal fleets, equally determined, no other was considered in place. Do you not apprehend, said Byng at his trial in examining Captain Gardner, his flag captain, that a line of battle is the strongest form of offensive and defensive form that ships can be ranged in to mutually assist and support each other? I do, answered Gardner. And when, Byng went on, an enemy's fleet of superior equal or nearly equal forces ranged in a line of battle, do you apprehend it imprudent, contrary to discipline, and dangerous to attack them in any other form than that of line of battle? But Gardner declined to answer, as it was a question of opinion and not of fact. Still, this question shows that Byng had a reasonable scientific basis for the faith that was in him. In his eyes, the rigid line was the key to mutual support, and to accuse him and his school of regarding a battle as a mere series of single-ship actions is to misjudge and misread the history of tactics. Nor is this all, for in judging Byng as a tactician, and before we brand him as a man bound hand and foot with the pedantry of the old fighting instructions, we must not forget that it was to this fleet, and by Byng himself, that was issued, so far as known, the first regular set of additional fighting instructions. It was by these sets of additional instructions that life and flexibility were given to a tactical development. No copy that can be identified as that issued by Byng has come down to us. The general character will appear from the free use he made of them during the action. Lastly, we have the fact that in making his attack, Byng, instead of adhering pedantically to the stereotype method of the old instructions, did attempt a modification of considerable merit. His captains mistook his meaning, or the result might have been very different. Hawke, who is always held up as the model of progress in contrast to Byng, certainly approved of the idea, and one of his first acts on superseding Byng was to adopt the new form of attack in an additional instruction of his own. With these facts in mind, Byng's action may be approached with some possibility of right judgment. Revision of Admiral Byng. Right. I have just been texted. Apparently the door is open on the what do you call it? The greenhouse, and I have to go close it. Cascading, what's a good conflict involving ironclad that personally would think be interesting to wargame and do the hobby side of? Ooh. Franco-Prussian War. Franco-Prussian War, definitely. It's interesting. Ooh. Oh, today's been fun. The and Pura. Hippos were a far better cruiser compared to the Deutschen class. No, the Hipper's 8-inch armament makes them a far better cruiser in terms of their armament, and they can achieve higher speed, certainly. But I wouldn't be. I would be careful to call either one that much significantly better than the other, in any regard, because that would suggest that either one is, for their size, shape, and tonnage, somewhere remotely an effective design. They are incredibly scary ships, but that's because they exist. That's right, for dyslexia, you sure do have a decent reading pace. Yeah, it's the form of dyslexia, and it's thanks to a lot of practice. The range is fine next to one on the Deutschland's class. The 8-9 Sat-Lanzen engines not necessarily a bad idea, but they do probably need more. I think I discussed the Deutschland class when I was talking about the various engine forms in... Was it diesel? I think it was diesel engines. I went through the forms of engines. And I went through the structures, etc., of what you could form and exactly what the scenario was for the Deutschland class, as well as one of the options. And some of the options pursued for the German destroyers. And the fact is, you could have modified things to be a little bit better. A lot better. Seem to remember also with the... I remember what it was. It was the Diesel Kriegsmarine videos. I went through it with the Deutschland class. Andy, so different mission is what you're saying? Yes. Yes, very different mission. Although I'm still not sure about the person who seems to keep commenting, claiming that the reason that the Graf Zeppelin was to have 6-inch guns was A, so it could be a better cruiser than the German Navy's cruisers, and B, so that they could fight destroyers if they were attacked in the Barents Sea. Because in my view, if you're coming under attack by an entire flotilla of destroyers in the Barents Sea, things have gone dramatically wrong at various points. A lot of things have gone wrong. Let's see if I can find image, file, Diesel Kriegsmarine, come on. Where's the picture? It would be starting from these, wouldn't it? Diesel Kriegsmarine. There you go, yeah. So, as you can see, the Zastora 1942 has 4 engines hooked up to one shaft. Now, the Deutschland class, they, if I remember correctly, and this is the advantage of being an academic, you never throw away any slides, you just have them in places. They had 2 shafts with 8 diesel engines. So they are all connected. Rather like so. Okay? You see the 4 engines connected by gearing to a single shaft. Basically, what you needed for the Deutschland class to get them up to a decent speed was a 3rd shaft and another set of 4 engines. Which would have enabled you to, A, get up to probably You're talking 81,000 shaft. Well, 80. What? You're talking somewhere in the region of 80 to 81,000 shaft horsepower. At which point you're probably also longer, so you can carry more fuel and you have more space on Deutschland. And under that scenario, you're probably going to be a far better vessel. Also, if you could do it whilst adding on another 3 guns and turning a Deutschland into a mini Scharnhorst, that'd be better. Remember, is there a decent book on the Admiralty surveying the German coast in Northampton War? No. Mm-hmm. There's the pages I was looking for. Bum 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 bum. Not the East Indies. Not Grimaldi's Intrigue. Hawke's unlucky star, as Newcastle had foretold, was waning. His peerage was still denied to him. Pitt, who had never liked him, had been exasperated with his scene at his failure to grasp the possibilities of the situation at Quiberon, and his original patron, the old king, was dead. The scant recognition of the Admiral's services, however, was by no means confined to Pitt. There was certainly existed general dissatisfaction. To all appearances, his last command had been entirely barren and inactive. No service had been done of a kind to touch the popular imagination. It was forgotten how little the completeness of his victory left him to do. Still, it was not to be denied that the ships which had escaped into the Charente and Vilaine remained in the security they had reached, and no attempt had been made to destroy them. In January, 2 of them, with a couple of frigates, actually got away to Brest under the charge of a few brilliant young officers who had volunteered for the act of service. It can hardly be argued in Hawke's favour that their destruction was impossible, for he had been in the act of attempting a carefully elaborated operation to that end when he had received the first intimation that Keppel's expedition was coming. Later critics have supported the opinion at the time the opinion of the time in severely censuring his inactivity. There is, however, this in support of his attitude. The operation he contemplated was essentially one for a military force, and if he had reason to expect that a military force was coming, it was at least correct not to hazard the fighting efficiency of his fleet and his power of keeping control of the sea by exposing a large part of his crews ashore. Moreover, when he abandoned his own scheme, he was only told that the expedition was postponed, not that it was abandoned. All, indeed, that can be fairly be laid on his charge is that his genius for using the command of sea was not equal to that of which he displayed in obtaining it. Or, as Pitt succinctly put it, he was a fine sea officer, but no minister. At the end of January, when the menacing attitude of Spain could be ignored no longer, Anson had ordered him to send home all his 3-deckers. A week later, he was told to bring them home himself, and in March, just as Pitt decided finally to send Keppel against Belle Isle, he struck his flag as Spithead. Now, therefore, he was enjoying the repose that his long winter blockade had earned, and took no part in the revival of the coastal warfare which had been inaugurated under his flag at Rochefort. Pitt's resumption of his original policy is worth the closely studying. The policy had come to be judged by the Rochefort expedition. Its real exploitation was at Belle Isle. It is therefore there in its rifest form we should look not only for the strategical power of such designs, but also for the character and spirit of the operations they demand. For though the force were both in its units and its commander seemed tainted with the old Rochefort sickness, its performance was in every way the antithesis of that unhappy fiasco. It is true the first attack of Keppel and Hodgson proved, as has been said, a failure, but it was just this failure that marked how great a change had been brought in the spirit of the service since Pitt first took the war in hand. Owing to adverse weather, it was not till April the 6th that they were off Belle Isle, but 6 frigates had already been thrown forward to cut off its communication with the mainland. Working in during the night, the fleet rounded the south end of the island at daybreak, keeping close inshore so that the reconnaissance could be made as it passed. The inspection was not encouraging. Every accessible point was well entrenched and guarded by batteries. Still, at an inlet upon the southwestern eastern shore, known as Loch Maria Bay. Ooh. I am doing another Wilson. I didn't realise that. Both Keppel and Hodgson thought they saw a chance. They were for attempting it on the spot, but the wind was southerly, almost dead at landing place, and it put an attack out of question. They had to pass on, and as noon, the whole fleet anchored in the road opposite Palais, the chief town and fortress of the island, which lay on the northeastern shore facing the mainland. Not to waste time while the flat boats were being prepared for the troops, the two chiefs at once proceeded together in a cutter to reconnoitre the extreme north end, where stood the little fishing port of Suzon. But here, as everywhere, they found the garrison alert and formidably entrenched. The coast, wrote the general, is the most inaccessible I ever saw. The whole island is a fortification. To both of them the task looked almost desperate. But no longer was there a reason, as at Rochefort, for trying. The enemy, wrote Hodgson, have been at work upon it ever since Edward Hawke appeared here in winter. But all this is nothing. The fashion of the times required extraordinary measures. Therefore, when we returned from our reconnoitring, we agreed that the Port St. Andrew on the southeast part of the island was the most practical place to attempt a descent. Here surely was Wolfe's spirit burning. Again we can hear the echo of the words he wrote in his shame for Rochefort. The greatness of an object should come under consideration as opposed to the impediments that lie in the way. Indeed, the whole conduct of the enterprise was exact accordance with his triumphant and soldier-like criticism. Here was no council of war, no considering whether an attack was feasible or not, but an instant decision by the Admiral-General in perfect harmony to try hard where the thing looked least ugly. From Keppel's letter it appears Port St. Andrew was the same little bay they had reconnoitred the previous day, near Port Locomere, and here on the morrow they set to work. To ease the difficulty of the task, Captain Sir Thomas Stanhope, elder Swifter, who had been knighted for his conduct in Boscan's action at Lagos, and had also fought well at Quiberon, was ordered to make a demonstration to the north against Selzeron, with 2 battalions and marines. With the rest of the troops in the flat boats, Keppel went southward, sending forward 2 of the line to destroy a battery that commanded the beach at Port St. Andre. This was quickly done, and the troops were at once pushed forward for the strip of sand they had been marked for a footing. Above it rose the hills in an amphitheatre, where the enemy were entrenched up to the teeth. Under a destructive fire, the troops moved in and effected a landing with boldness and precision. But it was only to be brought to a hopeless standstill. The foot of the hill had been so cleverly scarped away that it was impossible to reach the enemy's breastworks without scaling ladders. Desperate attempts were made, but all in vain, and Generals Crawford and Carleton, who were in command, decided to retreat. Meanwhile, a party of 60 grenadiers, who had landed at a little distance from the rest, succeeded in climbing up beyond the entrenchments and formed up on the top. Could they have been supported, all might have gone well, but unfortunately their success was not seen in time. Before anything could be done, all but 20 were killed or taken prisoner. It was a gallant but unhappy beginning. Though the retirement had been well covered by the ships and bomb vessels, the loss was about 500 men. To make matters worse, as the troops were getting back to the fleet, a severe gale blew up, lasting all night and all next day, and in the end half the flat boats on which a landing depended were lost. Both Commodore and General became increasingly seriously discouraged. At first, Keppel, in announcing the defeat to the Admiralty, had quietly informed them they were going to find a better place and try again. But that proved not so easy. After careful reconnaissance, they could find no spot which gave any hopes of success, and a few days later both of them wrote home to Pitt that they regarded it as quite impractical to make a good landing. Seeing the situation Pitt was in at the moment, the repulse was a serious blow to his influence. But it does not seem they lost heart for a moment. Instead of repining, he immediately ordered off 4 more battalions with a fresh supply of boats and military stores. So determined was he to succeed that even at the risk of delaying the Martinique enterprise, he devoted to the Belle Isle reinforcements, some of the transports preparing to go out into New York to carry Amherst's troops to the West Indies, and for their escort he called for 5 more ships of the line. He knew his men. With such a war-seasoned band as they were, despair does not last long. A week later, they were joined by a number of transports bringing on four troops of light dragoons, which had not been ready to sail the fleet. They at once decided to try again, since the newcomers would enable them to support a fresh attack with 2 feints instead of 1. This was important, for the attempt was to be on a new plan, modelled apparently on Wolf's great exploit. Both the commanders were still the opinion that all the ordinary landing places were impregnable. But it was thought, says Keppel, that by attempting a place where the mounting of the rocks was just possible, and where the enemy consequently had not thought of entrenchment, they might succeed. Such a chance seemed to offer at point just to the south of Port Locomia, where stood a small work called Fort d'As. Here was to be the main attack, and Crawford, the second in command, was again entrusted with it. He was to be assisted by a feint under Brigadier Hamilton Lambert. Upon the little village of St. Foy, which stood on the opposite or northern side of Port Longmere, the eastern extremity of the land. This demonstration was to be supported by Stanhope from the sea with 3 of the line and 44, and at the same time, the demonstration against Susan to the northward was to be repeated by the newly arrived dragoons with 2 of the line and some frigates. By April 22nd, all was ready. Daybreak, the ships were in position and at work with their batteries, while the troops gathered in at the stations. By 3 o'clock, the enemy's guns, not without considerable damage to the ships, were silenced and the attack began. Crawford made for Fort d'As, where he found the enemy ready and in great strength to meet him. Lambert, however, reached the shore without a shot being fired, and finding himself unobserved, landed his force about halfway between St. Foy and Port Lomera. There was not a soul to oppose him, but above his head tower cliffs that the French regarded as defence enough. Lambert was of a different opinion. He had been told he might push home his feint if he saw a fair chance, and he thought he did. It was a case of the heights of Abraham over again, and he had at least one good precedent to justify his daring. The Grenadier Company of the 19th Foot led the way, and succeeded in reaching the summit still unobserved. A detachment of Marines followed, and before the enemy, whose attention was absorbed in watching Crawford's column on the other side of the point, could recover their surprise, more troops had joined the advance parties. At last, from the heights upon which the enemy were watching Crawford, they were attacked by half a battalion of regular infantry, but posting themselves behind a low wall, they held their ground and were a steady fire till Lambert himself joined them with another Grenadier company and the rest of the Marines. He immediately ordered an advance, attacked the enemy in the flank, and forced them to retire upon their guns at the top of the hill they had come from. Below, Captain Stanhope had been eagerly watching the brilliant feat of arms from his ship, and the moment he saw the advance, he signalled for his boats manned and armed to support Lambert's attack. The movement attracted Crawford's attention. With quick perception, he saw what it meant, and promptly followed suit. Abandoning his own attack on Fort d'As, he hurried back around Point Locmac to his colleague's assistance. Thus, thanks to the quick appreciation of Stanhope and Crawford, Lambert soon found himself strong enough to press home his attack and supply his opponents in their commanding position. By 5 o'clock, the whole of the troops were landed, and before night, Hodgson was securely posted with all his force on a height 3 miles in the interior. They're good books. And the 7 Years' War is interesting. Actually, we're not meant to make those combining gears. No one did, but they worked. Sure, the Hippers are worse than New Orleans or Wichita and 5,000 tons heavier. For context, the Baltimore class is about 3,000 tons heavier than New Orleans. Where would I start with Corbett? Probably with this book. Some Principles of Maritime Strategy, which is, thankfully, our next book to read. This is definitely the starting place. It's a nice read, it's an easy read. Again, at the back, as I was talking about in my discussion of ADS on Tuesday, you find his lesson plans. It's a good point. It's a good starting point. I don't know, is it fair to say Deutschland's long range leave vulnerable to situations like that across away? That is the vulnerability of all surface raiders. Eventually they get found, and probably, as they usually are used by the weaker power against the stronger power will usually turn up with more force. They're coronation flags. Free ones I got from my local newsagent. Consequence. How many attacks and fortifications have failed for want of ladders? Well, I can only speak from my own experience on Rome Total War and various other Total War games, but a lot. A lot have failed for want of ladders. A lot have failed for want of a ladder. A lot have failed for want of a ladder. So, let's start off with the introduction. So that's a good place to start with the book. If the Bearcat made it in service during World War II, she'd be remembered as one of the greatest aircraft of all time. As it was, she didn't make it in time, and so she's largely forgotten. I did an entire paper on, which is published on Globe Maritime History. Well, it was originally published on British Naval History, but then Globe Maritime History. Peaking obsolescence of forgotten innovation. It's all about those sort of aircraft. The beginning of the jet age, end and the piston age, and the skills of those aircraft evolved. At first sight, nothing can appear more unpractical, less promising, or useful to the result than to approach the study of war with a theory. There seems indeed to be something essentially antagonistic between the habit of a mind that seeks theoretical guidance and that which makes for the successful conduct of war. The conduct of war is so much a question of personality, of character, and of common sense, of rapid decision upon complex and ever-shifting factors, and these factors themselves are so varied, so intangible, so dependent upon unstable moral and physical conditions, that it seems incapable of being reduced to anything like true scientific analysis. At the bare idea of a theory or science of war, the mind recurs uneasily to well-known cases where highly scientific officers failed as leaders. Yet, on the other hand, no one will deny that since the great theorists of the early 19th century attempted to produce a reasoned theory of war, its planning and conduct have acquired a method, a precision, and a certainty of grasp which were unknown before. Still less will anyone deny the value which the shrewdest and the most successful leaders in war have placed upon the work of the classical strategical writers. The truth is that the mistrust of the theory arises from the misconception of what it is that theory claims to do. It does not pretend to give the power of conduct in the field. It claims no more than to increase the effective power of conduct. Its main practical value is that it can assist a capable man to acquire a broad outlook whereby he may be the surer his plan shall cover all the ground, and whereby he may with greater rapidity and certainty seize all the factors of a sudden situation. The greatest of the theorists himself puts the matter quite frankly. Of theoretical study, he says, it should educate the mind of the man who is to lead in war, or rather guide him to self-education, but it should not accompany him on the field of battle. In its practical utility, however, it is not by any means confined to its effect upon the powers of the leader. It is not enough that a leader should have the ability to decide rightly. His subordinates must seize at once the full meaning of his decision, and be able to express it with a certainty and well-adjusted action. For this, every man concerned must have been trained to think in the same plane. The chief's order must awake in every brain the same process of thought. His words must have the same meaning for all. If theory or tactics had existed in 1780, and if Captain Clarke had had a sound training in such a theory, he could not possibly have misunderstood Rodney's signal. As it was, the real intention of the signal was obscure, and Rodney's neglect to explain the tactical device it indicated robbed his country of a victory at an hour of the direst need. There had been no previous theoretical training to supply the mission, and Rodney's fine conception was unintelligible to anybody but himself. Nor is it only for the sake of mental solidarity between a chief and his subordinates that the theory is indispensable. It is of still higher value for producing similar solidarity between him and his superiors on the council table at home. How often have officers dumbly acquiesced in ill-advised operations simply for lack of mental power and verbal apparatus to convince an impatient minister where the errors of his plan lay? How often, moreover, have statesmen and officers, even in the most harmonious conference, been unable to decide on a coherent plan of war from inability to analyse scientifically the situation they had to face and to recognise the general character of the struggle in which they were about, page 6, to engage? That the true nature of war should be realised by contemporaries as clearly as it comes to the scene afterwards in the fuller light of history is seldom to be expected. At close range, accidental factors will force themselves into undue prominence and tend to obscure the true horizon. Such error can scarcely ever be eliminated, but by theoretical study we can reduce it. Nor by any other means can we hope to approach the clearness of vision with which posterity will read our mistakes. Theory is, in fact, a question of education and deliberation, and not of execution at all. That depends on the combination of intangible human qualities, which we call executive ability. There you go. Some principles of maritime strategy. Just fun, like the Codex. Exactly like the Codex. The more and more I do, one of the things I enjoy about doing this channel is the more and more I do it, the more and more I think people are starting, all of you who are regular viewers and people who are even starting to join it, are starting to get the idea of why I link together science fiction with sometimes with my teaching and when I'm doing the sort of the war studies, etc. and that sort of area, because the same principles can be are often applied across and through. Because well-written science fiction often draws from the knowledge and understanding of the present. You know. And the Codex is exactly it. It's basically the Codex Astartes. The whole idea of the Codex Astartes is it's to make things very quick and very easy for officers to understand for everyone to understand what they need to do in a situation. And once you have that level of understanding, you can increase a tremendous amount of technical flexibility. It's why I don't like when people say Ultramarines are dogmatic because they're sticking to the Codex. No, they can be very innovative within that Codex. That Codex does not mean that Codex is not a dogma that they have to abide by. It's more a framework of what they have to think by when it's properly applied. Simple, as you said, it's sometimes a statement of the obvious. Yes, because it has to be. That's what Julian Corbett is having to do. And that's one of the things I find it funny. When people go, but he's stating the obvious. You go, but look who he's frigging talking to. Of course he needs to state the obvious. Just wrong. To extend to what I wanted to say, the Codex isn't set in stone, but offers suggestions. But you can't teach innovation. Well, maybe Machiavelli also just stated the obvious. Yes, but sometimes you need to do that. I remember one of the critiques I read of my book when I published it was that I'd gone too much into the details of various systems, which people who are reading it should know about it. And I went, well, no, because not everyone reading it's going to know those systems. And you are, if you don't include that information, you are gatekeeping and providing a thing which stops people from being able to go further because they can't follow it. But also there's the fact that stating the obvious, like some definitions of systems, like anti-submarine warfare, like all those, it needs to be done sometimes for people to follow on for it, and sometimes for people to remember that's what they're doing. You need to state the obvious sometimes. Seems like, what would the historians do if there were no politicians elected to? Well, as a historian, I'd like to say that we predate politicians. But realistically, we probably don't. But in the nicest way, we teach a lot more than just politicians. Ouch and Stafford. Ouch on the tooth. I would say everyone benefits from reading Corbett. I go back and read Corbett at least twice a year. Mainly to remind myself before I teach him. I go back and read him. And every time I read it, it's... how to put it? Sometimes you read it and you go, ah, frigate. I forgot that. And it's not so much I forgot that, it's just a case of, oh, I haven't mentioned that, I haven't thought to mention that. And it's a good reminder of some of the core things. It's one of the things I sort of point out when you're doing historical analysis. You spend your time, sometimes you're trying to make a bridge between the bit you can prove and the next bit you can prove, and you're not sure how they link together. And you have to make a bit of a leap, and you have to sort of work what's the point they leap by. Which point. And every single point you have to go, right, and you could be this thing they leap by. And you have to do a point analysis and go, well, how does that fit with all the other information that's all the way around it? You have to do that, and you have to do that in a methodical fashion, or you can miss something. Sure, Mike, there's no substitute for understanding first principles of experience. Honestly, I'd say you want both. You want first principles and the experience. Because once you reach a certain point in research, you usually forget most people have no idea what you're talking about. Yeah. And this book, Maritime Operations in the Russo-Japanese War, 1904 to 1995 by Julian Corbett. And I want to read something in here specifically. Let me find the correct. The Battle of the Sea of Japan. That's Tashima. Hang on. Sorry, I want to find a specific quote about Rosnensky. And rather than scanning through the whole book, I'm just going to the index and just looking for R. Ships. PQR. Rosnensky, Admiral. It's either page 6 or page 406. Let's see if it's on page 6. I doubt it is. I reckon it's page 406, but you know. Early in 1903, Admiral Turotov died, and Admiral Arvelen became the Minister of Marine in his place, while Rear Admiral Rozalensky was brought up as Chief of the Headquarter Staff. He appointed was dated March the 30th, and he at once put his finger on the weak point of the situation. Immediately on taking up my appointment, he stated, knowing the negative qualities of Port Alpha, I suggested to the Minister of Marine the selection of some other base, and pointed out the urgency of equipping it thoroughly, and of exercising the fleet in its new surroundings. The Minister of Marine at once got into communication with the Commander-in-Chief in the Far East, Admiral Alexiev, who expressed no opinion on essentials, that is, the question of a new base, but was only inclined to accept the proposal of sending him some ships of the volunteer fleet to furnish supplies to the squadron to carry out auxiliary operations. When these vessels were obtained, the Commander-in-Chief refused to take up a strategically advantageous position or to carry out necessary exercises, lest he should incur the wrath of the Japanese, and he added that he had another plan, in accordance with which he was deploying naval forces under his command. This was the plan indicated at staff conference held on April 23rd, 1903, when Admiral Shuttleberg reached Port Arthur with reinforcements. At this meeting, Captain Egbert, flag captain to Admiral Stark, who then commanded the squadron, proposed basing the whole fleet at Sylvia Basin. But the rest of the officers present rejected the idea, on the ground, apparently, that as the Japanese fleet was then held to be superior, and the proposed base was so near to the enemy's headquarters and flotilla stations, that the Russian squadron would run too great a risk of being blockaded. In the face of this attitude on the part of the Far Eastern staff, Admiral Rozensky, like General Kuropotin, soon came to the conclusion that in existing circumstances it was madness for Russia to go to war at all. This general view is clear from the certain comments which he made upon an appreciation submitted to him by one of the staff in October 1903. The conclusion of this officer was that only by a decisive victory over the Japanese, by which they could be deprived of the right to keep a navy, could the situation in the Far East be settled. And for this reason, the Russians could not be ready for 2 years. This was also the view of General Kuropatin, who was then the Minister of War, but Admiral Rozensky's appreciation was not quite so pessimistic as the general's. In his opinion, the Russian fleet was better prepared for war with Japan than it had ever been, and as it stood, was capable of defensive action in the Far East sufficiently strong to enable the army to settle the business. Our object, he commented, is not to wipe out the Japanese, but only to annex Korea to our possessions. Until that is done, meaning of course by the army, we require a fleet equal to that of Japan in order to simplify the task of our army. When the annexation is an accomplished fact, we shall require a fleet to equal that of the Japanese in order to live at peace with them. Victory over Japan can only be won in Korea. There is no need for us to have a crushing preponderance at sea over the Japanese. It is sufficient to be equal in strength and not to allow the Japanese to obtain supremacy at sea, so that our army may be better able to drive them out of Korea. That great point is never to have a weaker fleet than the Japanese. By this means, he believed a rupture could be prevented. The preparations suggested in the staff memorandum he approved, but only, he added, so that there shall be no war, for a war with Japan can be of no possible advantage to us. Now, if I turn to page 406... Interesting. I did find a correct page. His battle instructions, 189. This is a really good read, by the way. The real explanation of Admiral Rozensky's remaining so long as he did in French waters is still wrapped in some obscurity. According to the best authority we know, that he completed his coaling from the German transports on April the 18th. But although, as we have seen, all other evidence points to his anxiety to proceed at once, he did not move. The same authority professes to be ignorant of his motive. We are told the Admiral himself after the battle gave as his reason that he was short of coal. At that time, owing to his wounds, he was certainly not responsible for what he said, and the explanation has to be dismissed. The idea of making a demonstration with a view to a good peace was also to be set aside, since owing to the attitude of France, no base in the China Sea could be obtained. It must be supposed, therefore, this authority concludes, that the cause of the delay was the desire of the Admiral that the squadron should be recalled to Russia, and which he hinted to in his options from the Cameron, though he did not express his opinion openly. We have every reason to believe that by the testimony of the men on his staff, that this was in fact his opinion, but other indications suggest that it was not the real reason for his long wait, although it was officially adopted in Russia as affording a plausible grounds for laying the whole responsibility of the breach of French neutrality on the shoulders of an admiral who had failed. The reason, according to the only authority we have, was a direct order from St. Petersburg. We know at any rate that by the 18th, Admiral Rozensky was in communication with headquarters through Saigon, and possibly also by a land telegraph office that existed not far from Kamran. We know also that Admiral Nebogotov was within about a fortnight's steaming of the position. Further, it must be remembered that Admiral Rozensky believed that the main Japanese fleet was somewhere in the South China Sea, and reports that Mankang had been mined and fortified indicated that his adversary was based on that port. On the prevailing appreciations, therefore, a rapid attempt by the Japanese admiral to strike at him, where he lay before Negobotov's division arrived, was highly probable, and he could wish for nothing better. It was obviously to his advantage to accept battle far from the enemy's zone of highest control, and in an area where the numerous ports of friendly neutrals were available as harbours of refuge. On April the 16th, he made every preparation for this eventuality. The casemates, which up till now had been used for storing extra coal, were cleared. The officers' quarters were used instead. At the same time, he issued battle instructions based on the idea of leaving his transports under cruiser and flotilla protection in the bay and keeping his best fighting ships free to engage the enemy without preoccupation. These orders, indeed, make it quite clear the admiral was not only anticipating an action where he was, but being fully determined not to wait it at anchor. He meant to offer battle in the open, where he would be able to manoeuvre free of encumbrance of his transports. This idea, then, is quite sufficient to explain his delay on strategical grounds, which had much to justify them. But that it was not the sole reason seems clear from the following facts. After his first visit, Admiral de Jonquières had gone on to Natal, the capital of the district 20 miles from northward. 4 days later, he reappeared, and going on board the Suvorov, informed the Russian admiral that instructions had arrived from Paris by which he was to request him to leave French waters at once, and that 24 hours respite was the utmost that could be granted. Communication appears to have been received with something of a shock, for till this moment the Russians seem to have believed that Admiral de Jonquières' benevolent attitude represented that of the French government, and that so long as they kept away from the regular ports, their ally would shut their eyes to their proceedings. To the bitterness of what they regarded as desertion, there was added a practical difficulty of the most serious kind which the Admiral now had laid before his officers. Next morning on 22nd, he summoned his flag officers and captains on board the flagship and communicated for them the notice to quit. But he also had to add that he received orders not to proceed till the 3rd Squadron arrived. My orders, he is reported saying, are to wait for Nebogotov. His intention, therefore, he added, was to put to sea and remain outside territorial waters off Cameron Bay, where the supply ships of the auxiliaries could be left. From this position, he would endeavour to keep up communication with headquarters through Saigon, and would remain till he had only just enough coal left to reach Vladivostok. If Admiral Nebogotov had not arrived by that time, he was no help for it, and he would go on. The conference was then dismissed, and at 1 in the afternoon, exactly 24 hours after the notice to quit had been received, he put to sea. It's a good book. Sure. David, don't feel so bad about the review. I got basically saying, oh, I didn't. Honestly, the person who took the reviews most personally on all my books was Drac. Without a shadow of a doubt, the person who took them most personally. He read them all. And I'm not sure if he ever recorded it, but he did at several points prepare response videos to people's various reviews, and he was basically taking reviews to pieces. And I was going, thank you, mate. That's very kind of you. I was annoyed by some of them because some of them were for people who I have met at conferences and have great respect for, and I thought, well, nicest way when it comes to your books, when I've had problems, I've said so privately and haven't done a public review. But you haven't said anything privately, and you've just done a public review where you've basically decided you were going to just call it just try and find bad points and not mention any good points. And there are bad points in the book. The biggest problem, which I admit at the very beginning, was that due to COVID and various other things, I hadn't managed to get to the Australian and Canadian archives. I hadn't managed to get to their archives, so I hadn't included the Canadian Australian books in the Tribal Battles and Darings. I just hadn't. Because I hadn't managed to get the archives. And I actually put a section in the book end of introduction explaining that. And basically apologising, but in sort of not apologising, but not apologising for it. Basically saying, look, I haven't done this because of this. But some people really couldn't get over that the Australians and Canadian ships weren't included. They were mentioned, they were discussed in part, where their parts where I was reasonably sure, because I had good archive access in the UK to details of what their ships got up to, but they weren't otherwise. I thought that was fair. Take care, Tanif. Hope you feel better. Sure, obviously, but gathering experience is well beyond the means of the civilian, to some extent, even certain militaries in peacetime. To an extent, yes. Mahan's Beatty's mission was obviously to scout for the battlefield, but no one could pound the obvious into Beatty's head. Yes. Now, if the Douglas SBD-5 Dauntless had not come so late to the Royal Navy, would they have taken it on as a stopgap until the Barracuda came online? Potentially. They decided if it was better than Albacore. That would have been the question. If it was, sort of viable to assist in the Royal Navy's in the strike role. That's a great one. Would it be fair to say Deutschland's long range left it in a vulnerable situation like that of Grafsway? I think I've answered that one already. I said that's the problem for all surface raiders. They're always answer. They're always answer that. It's wrong. How do you find doing uni from your degree to PhD? I enjoyed it, but I'm a workaholic, so I really did enjoy it, and I took on a lot of extra modules. I took on a lot of extra modules. And another chicken hassle. Only to find out they'd gotten into a fight amongst themselves. Occasionally this happens. Hello, Chris Shea. Hi, Richard. No, sir, I've already answered the Takar class question. Takar class question on the blast effects. I know I've answered that one. Debrock, you seem to be answering repeating questions that Dr. Clarke has already answered. Yeah, it happens, don't worry. I better not review it. I don't mind people reviewing books. I really don't. And I review books often. But the thing is, if I have negative things to say, I usually tell people about it before I publish the review. They don't get a right to change my review. But occasionally I will tell them, and I go, do you have a... And the thing is, with that one, I found people making that the central point of their critique of their review of the book. It was a bit strange, as I literally told them that in the introduction. So there's literally a paragraph in the introduction which explains it, and then that forms the basis of many of their critiques about it. And it's a case of... So anyway, can't wait to see how my book gets slagged off when it comes out of full. It won't be slagged off. Drac is a really great friend. Drac is writing a book as we speak. There are books coming out from Drac. Honest, I would say that Grass Bay's predicting was more that the Panzer Chief may beat any single cruiser. I doubt it would beat any 8-inch cruiser, but leave that to one side. But the RN was never going to serve up single cruisers. No, there were a few 8-inch cruisers out hunting the Panzer Chief on their own. And trust me, the Panzer Chief were doing their best to avoid them. There's a whole story with HMS Cumberland where basically, wherever she is, Grass Bay is trying as far as she can to be as far away from her as possible. Don't worry, that's experiment. If you go back, we'll go back and watch earlier, you'll find it. In Morrison, are there any suspects of Corbett's thinking that are particularly impacted Monday? I'd say all bit is pretty much. I'd say the trouble is you need a combination of Mahan and Corbett because you need the shock tactics to remind people of the value of the sea, because they got so used to peace at sea that no one really thinks about what the problem will be. I was having this conversation with a very good friend, and I was talking about layers of resilience. And I was explaining how you need the third layer, the third and fourth layers of resilience in any sort of structure. And that's the first lesson you learn from war, because Sod's law dictates that your first thing might get your commander might get taken out, your deputy commander might get taken out. You need someone who's the third most senior person to coordinate it, and you need a fourth person. And I pointed out I used the standard brigade structure as the command the equal, because normally you have a brigade commander, you have a deputy brigade commander wandering around these days. Then you'll have the chief artillery officer, who is usually a senior officer and will be prepared to take over, has all the command and centers equipment because they need to for coordinating artillery anyway. So they'll be in position to be the third in command. And that's where the command will fall. And then you have a fourth officer, who is similarly set up, who will be one of the senior battalion commanders. And they will know right through the battalion officers before they even begin who takes command, who has seniority, and there won't be any question. There is no randomness. You're in this role. And you have that because you have to maintain that level of commander control in warfare. You can't afford to have a scenario develop where there's a question of who's in command. It has to be very much a case of he's not here, or she's not here, or they're not here, whatever, you know. They're gone, they're gone, they're gone. That's in charge. That's it. They're gone, then you're in charge. We know. There's no question. There's no dispute. There's no. The example I always give is the Rook's Drift sort of movie, where the officers are sitting there comparing their dates of commission. Well, yeah, those officers haven't worked together, so they need to work it out. But there's a process already in place. Whoever's got the senior commission, they're in charge, and that's it. Thank you, Teacher90. Your offer to help the Queen Elizabeth class book is well appreciated and will probably be taken up with at some point. Lord Wolf, I notice a lot of people don't read the introduction, sadly. That's the trouble with a lot of people with books. They don't read introductions. And you should do. Most of the reviews were very good on my book. I was happy with that. But it's a case of, it is true what they say about one telling one, you know, one discussion, no biscuits, to raise 1,000 attaboys, and that's the case. My guys, was there any serious talk in Canada joining the US into war for independence, even if they don't become the 14 states, but become their own country? No. Honestly, most of the Canadians, because of the distance from Canada to the UK and the way you went around, it was far closer to the UK. It was actually considered far more important to the UK than the 13 colonies at several points, and the trouble is the Canadian ones were very different from the 13 colonies, because the Canadian colonies had mostly been set up as economic colonies, and occasionally the French one, of course Quebec, which they're different. And they're very differently run than the American colonies, which have been mostly set up by... Whilst I wouldn't use the category of religious extremists, they had been certainly set up by... that's proving popular in some Vogue history's moment to say that they were religious extremists. They weren't. They were set up by a section of Protestantism which didn't like the Protestantism in the UK. And they basically decided that it wasn't Protestant enough. It was too popish. And it's one of those things. You have this strong, and I tried to explain this with the Satan names the other day, and sort of that video that came out this morning. Well, yesterday. There are issues in the UK. There is a constant thread that goes through our politics, our culture, our religion, our navy, in naming things, from about the Reformation onwards, on whether things are too popish. It's almost before that they don't really mind. It doesn't matter. Yes, we've broken from the church. We've broken from the Catholic Church, but we haven't really changed that much. We haven't gone the full Calvinist reforms. We haven't gone the full sort of that way. We have gone our own way, which Church of England is sort of a mixture of Anglican. It's sometimes described as low or high Anglican, and it's, you know, it's very interesting in its form. It's sort of almost nebulous. But after the Reformation, there is a constant need to deal with the fact that there is a large chunk of the United Kingdom, by which point, who have, whilst they didn't go quite as far as the ladies and gentlemen of the Puritans, etc., had gone, wanted a far more, how do I put this politely, a far more Protestant church than a popish church, in there, and to use the phraseology at the time. Please note, that's what I'm using. That's I to try and explain it. It's important sometimes to use the lexicon at the time, because the lexicon we would use today sometimes misses some of their meaning and some of their context. But also you have to be careful in that you do not ascribe those words meaning or context that they do not have at that time. Okay? And that was, in many ways, a reaction to... It got worse with the reaction to fighting the French and fighting the Spanish, who, of course, were major Catholic powers. So, the more we fought the Catholic powers, the more we sought comfort in being more Protestant. But there had been, especially in the early part, groups which had been very, very Protestant, very anti any of the things which they saw as the Catholic adornments and falsehoods. And that group had provided a large proportion of the people who formed the core of the colonies. And that had set up the standards for those colonies. And that meant the relationships not only were complicated internally between the 13 colonies, but with the later colonies established around them, because the differing in culture and establishment. And this is one of the things that complicates it, and one of the reasons why, when the 13 colonies do decide to go independent, etc., and they do in the War of Independence, decide to invade and go up into Canada to liberate, they find that the people that are there fighting are the Canadians, and a lot of the native population also turn out to support the British. Why? Because they really don't like the people of the 13 colonies, because of what they've heard about what they do to natives in their relation to their own territories. It's one of the interesting things. The native population in Canada trust the British more than they do the 13 colonies, the Americans. Mainly due to some of the incidents which had happened in the earlier wars in the American continent between the French settlers and the American settlers, and the Indians the Native Americans, had been a native population had been part of the, basically part of the struggle. Sorry, I'm having to switch back brain, and my brain keeps going. One point was going, hang on, no, it just reminded me, because I was teaching the other day the issues in the Indian subcontinent, and it's very similar. It's fun. It's a whole lot of complicated and basically very human history. And by complicated, I mean it's a very rich, very expansive area, and anything I say in even a 2 to 3 hour lecture would be a horrible abridgment of the true depth and richness going on, and the variety. There is a friend of mine who teaches on a course, and that course is a full year-long course, and it's 2-hour lecture each week and a 2-hour seminar, although I think they've broken up into about 4 or 5 different seminar groups for their course, all about that period. And the thing is, that course is taught spread load between 3 full-time lecturers, a professor, and about half a dozen PhD teaching assistants, and they still complain they don't have enough time to teach all of it properly. Students have to do a lot of reading for that course. Oh, there are some of the Protestants that are Calvinist Scottish, and of course there's the Free Church of Scotland. Why don't we know any more about the Russian Sovietsky Soyuz class? Probably because not many historians got access to the Russian archives before after the wall fell, before the wall rearranged itself around their archives, and very few of the ones who did get access were actually naval historians who were looking after that sort of information. I have no idea. My sister is wandering around the garden again. Why is it every Sunday when I'm doing these lives, she suddenly becomes a garden gnome? This could be an entire psychological study. It could be. Okay, anyway, Rule of cool always gets thrown in. Now, sorry, would it be fair to think that if Francis completed, they would have not have been fast battleship? Fair to think that Francis Caracal class had been completed, that they would not have been the fast battleships. They would have been fast battleships, and on that topic, I can tell you the Francisco Caracola class. When does it come out? Sorry, I have, as you can expect, in a moment, have uploaded rather a large amount of videos into my onto my channel. Rather large number of them. Got 2 more to upload tonight once I'm finished. The Francisco Caracola class battleships are scheduled for the 19th of May. So it comes out next Friday. Next Friday, you have a 20-minute video coming out on the Francisco Caracola class. And frankly, I make the case that if they had been built, they would have probably been the most impactful ships ever completed. Do you know what's scary? Is I look at this and then I realise that I have the Francisco Caracola ones, and then I have Stalingrad's battle cruisers, and then I have Tillman's maximum battleships. And that's the day, that comes out on the day I fly off to Australia. So yeah, when that's out, it comes out, I will be somewhere, I think over the Indian Ocean, heading for Singapore. My sister's not lifting anything more. My mum has banned her from doing that while I'm live. She's not supposed to lift stuff. Because my sister is actually not supposed to lift stuff because she hurt herself a few years ago, so she is physically not supposed to lift stuff for fear of hurting herself again. This is the whole reason why, and I'm happy to admit this one, that when we're looking at long-term housing needs, we've come to the idea of we need to buy a large enough property that we have multiple dwellings on one site. So that basically the only other option is probably some form of which sound what I'm going to say sounds strange, but please take it in the spirit of me. Assisted living, in that they go to somewhere where they've got people they can call to assist them. And neither wants to do that because neither feels they really need that, and they don't really need that because they just need. My sister's case, they need someone to basically check the food, and occasionally do any lifting. That's fine. And in my mum's case, they need someone to help when she manages to fall down and can't get back up again. And I'm happy to do that, but I'd like my own front door, and I'd like to be able to have people around without worrying about stepping on everyone's toes and all those sort of things. And so we need to move. That's right. I don't manage to earn enough to go places I'd like to go. I don't either. I'm very lucky in that the very nice people, you all are very nicely supporting me in going to Australia. Frankly, it wouldn't be possible otherwise. Next year's trip would possibly be possible because it's quite a bit cheaper. The major thing is the flights. When you realise that of the cost to go to Australia, the flights there and back cost $4,000, it suddenly starts to make a lot of sense. The costs. No, it's not a good bro. And Andy annex. No. It needs to be a separate. Not so much an annex as in a. My often plan is I sort of want to convert some sort of thing like a garage or workshop space into a 1, possibly 2 bed, preferably both with ensuite showers. Ensuite wet rooms, my own little utility room, own kitchen, lounge, and office. So, not tiny, but enough space that I can have guests over. If they want to come over, I have space for that. I have space for my office. Preferably my own hot tub. If I get a time to get it in the airport, I've got a couple of hours in the airport one way and an hour in the airport the other way. So I might find find some sliced barbecue pork from Shanghai. Thank you, Sejan90. I'll have a look for it. I enjoy it. I enjoy taking care of my family and helping them make sure they're okay. It's what sons do. You're supposed to look after your family. It's what family does. I will say no one else can annoy me as much as family, but that's the whole reality of history, isn't it? No one can ever annoy you as much as the people you actually care for. Yeah, hot tub is the thing. Hot tub, maybe some an outdoor covered space for gym equipment. I.e. just basic things, a bike or something like that. A bike and set of weights. We have spotted a few places which are suitable. We've spotted a place in Dorset, seems to be where we're looking quite a lot, where we've spaces with about in our price range with a bit of acre, with about 0.7 to 0.8 of an acre. and so they have the suitable outhouses that can be converted, outbuildings that can be converted into an accommodation for me and an outside office complex for my sister. Because what my sister needs is a lab. She needs a testing lab for her equipment to be put, and because of course she doesn't currently have that at home, but we need to build her a proper rubberized concrete floor and all the proper soundproofing, so she can run her geotechnics equipment. Because she has lab pieces of equipment which still technically owned by her, but now are at her previous university employment, and are sitting there and are going to be there for until she can find a new space for them. It'll be fun. That's right. Did the US expect the Ironwind demand modification stuff like the Bruce SP2A Bermuda Vault? Yes. But the British often did. And often the Americans rather liked the modifications the British made. Remember, the British modifications to the Wildcat are one of the reasons why the Wildcat comes back and is so good in terms of operating and replacing the Buffalo. Richards, my dad says garage too. Imagine growing up knowing your forefathers invented language but not speaking it. Can't speak it. Unless it's with a kid. Garage. Yeah. Oh, I can change my accent when I need to. Going to the school I went to, I can go full posh. I can start speaking like this and go full, oh, garage. Yes. To the garage, oh boy. Let's get us all organised. How are we doing? Good day, what? I can do that. I can talk like this all day long, because this is where I went to school, that's how we spoke. That is what we spoke like at school. But that's not my own normal accent. It's not my normal voice. It's the voice which I find myself slipping into when I go into certain surroundings, and I start talking like this, and, well, I sound every bit the erudite, slightly upper class, upper middle class, scholarship boy with a PhD that I am in British circles, but that's not my normal voice. My normal voice is down here. It's sort of speaking like I normally do to all of you. So that's the thing. You know, I slip in that voice. If you bump into me in places like, I suppose, the London clubs, and I'm talking about the clubs as in the Liberal Club and those sort of things. When I'm invited in those places, I do find myself speaking like that. When I walk into various centres of learning, I will change my voice automatically, and I don't even think about it. I just do. And I go back to school. To the school I went to. I changed my voice to that. I was wondering, what mods did the British have demand to be done to Wildcat? Boosted engine, changed the backplate for the pilot, changed the wing design a bit. Just a few little minor things, but they made the aircraft go from being just beaten by the Buffalo to being far better than Buffalo, because it had the abilities to take change. I don't think the Kingfisher was actually in the end used by the RN, but they were looked at it for various things. I think it was possibly used by the Royal Canadian Navy. I seem to remember something along those lines. See if I do. And now I'm going to be stuck in that accent for the rest of the afternoon. Enjoy. Oh, this accent is not working class one. This is not a working class accent. This is just not upper middle class or posh. This is not a working class accent. This is very much a home counties accent. This is very much a home counties, to an extent, lower middle class accent. And if you heard me in Cornwall or Scotland, then you'd hear me picking up my family's accents up there in Cornwall. I start sounding Cornish, and I start sounding Scottish. But this is not what you call lower class accent at all. Don't take this wrong way, but I have had, thanks to my mum, too many influences in my life, my mum, my dad, etc., and the way they've always spoken, and then the educational background I've had, that I really do not speak in what would be considered I don't even like the phrase lower class, but well, in what would be phrased a less privileged accent, I suppose is the phrase you could describe it as, if you want. It might be the acceptable term these days, but there are various terms about it. But I just don't. I don't have that accent, and it's been fun. It's fun sometimes having the accent I do, because I have gone into some very economically disadvantaged schools to help out and teach, and I once had fun because there was a teacher there who was basically saying, "Oh, you should change your accent because otherwise the kids won't listen to you. Change your accent," and because that's what they did. And the kids all came to my class, which I was at my after-school history club, and loved coming to the after-school history club with me and me teaching them. And well, they weren't turning up to their class. And the reason the kids gave was that I was passionate about the topic, but also I was authentically me, and they knew the other teacher was faking it. There was also the fact that when that boy decided to try and intimidate me, I basically stared right back and went, "What are you going to do? What are you honestly going to do?" And the poor kid was sort of going, what are you going to do? Let's game this out, shall we? If you hit me, what happens to you? The best case scenario is I hit you back. And then we go about our day. And let's be honest, you might be a little bit taller than me, but you're a beanstick, and I'm about twice your width. So in nicest way, you hitting me, I might feel. Me hitting you, you will feel. However, more likely is that the cameras around here will pick it up. You will be kicked out of school. Your parents will be called. You'll be kicked out of school, and you might be sent even to the police call, depending on your previous conduct. In nicest way. And what have you gained that for? Why have you been even stepping up to me? What is the point in this? And you're sort of going, yours. So sit down or go out. Listen and learn or leave. I don't care which, but do one or the other. Stop standing there like a spare part. Was actually how I finished it off. And the boy sat down. And it was really interesting because the next week when I came along, I met the headmaster. And the headmaster turned around to me and said, "Yeah, you know, he doesn't come into school that often, and he actually comes into school for your after-school club, but doesn't come in for the lessons." Fine by me. That particular young boy did end up on a history course. Actually managed to end up, not after he'd finished A-levels, but after doing a foundation year at a college, ended up doing a history course at St Mary's. And has actually gone on to become a history teacher in the schools. I kept in contact with him. He did well. I raised the pitch of my voice when talking to students. Some thought I was a teenager when we were doing online alone. So, no, sorry, I had this problem if I'm talking to someone with a strong accent, I initiate the accent without thinking about it. That is the same problem, and I don't understand why. It's because you pick it up as a way of communication. It's a good skill. Richards, yeah, your accent is easy to not like some. I remember having a kid and not having no clue what my cousins were saying. Yeah. First visit with the cousins from the Highlands and Islands, up in the Highlands and Islands. The first week was going, "You speak so fast. I'm not quite sure what you're saying." I'll figure it out. By the way, if you're noticing there's a lot of books around here, that's because I've moved. I found another box of history books up in my up in the attic, so I brought them back down to the office. Working class depends on where. That is another reason, Steve. And my mother used to tell me off for speaking too common. My mum would never tell you off. She'd just look at you. Marnus, US pilots on the F4F. Too heavy and not enough rounds per gun. Brits want 6 guns. Can't they hit a target 4? So that part wasn't appreciated. The British wanted 6 rounds per gun because the British wanted to buzz the target and kill it quickly. And there again, it was the difference between the Americans were concentrated on length of fire, so they could, try and hit the target. The British were doing zoom and boom tactics in their Wildcats, and they enjoyed them enormously. And that was the difference. It was the zoom and boom tactics of the British and the airborne control, the way they controlled their fighters. No, it's sort of the same relationship my central Pennsylvania accent has with the Pittsburghese. Similar, but also very different. Andy, I think slang words come a lot into it. Yep. Hello, Melanie. Just one. Went to school now as driveway. Got asked where I was from in my own hometown. Night, Leslie. Nothing 1640. Best teachers I've had of the sit and learn or song bother those who don't bother with those learning. I don't care attitude. I operate the same in my university lectures. I will tell the students quite happily if they want to sit there having a conversation rather than listening to me. That's fine, but they can leave the room so they don't upset the others. And I once had some students in a university tell me that was very rude of me to kick them out, and I went, "You were talking over me, and the people are paying money to hear me talk, not you." So, in a nice way, if you want to waste your money, that's fine. You don't need to waste their money. And I can give the full talk about how many pounds an hour you are wasting if you are talking while the lecturer is talking. How much money you are forking over. And then you work that out by timesing that by the number of students in the room, and that's how much money you're throwing away for all of them. And it makes the class very, very different very quickly on the subject of talking while the lecturer's talking. It's one thing to ask questions, it's another thing to have a whole conversation with your friend about which boys at the party were looking sexiest, which was what those particular girls were having that conversation. The other topic of conversation is usually what's happened in the football match than that previous night. All those things like to come up, or happened in the pub, or various things, or even what happened in the previous lecture. Yeah. There's no need to have those conversations in the lecture. There just isn't. You're wasting your money. You're wasting other people's money. You're wasting my time. Just, if you don't want it, leave. I won't mind. Nice way, you won't hear what's going to be in the coursework assignment. You won't hear what's going to be in the exam. The pointers I will give towards questions which may or may not feature in the exam. It's not my fault if you've chosen that you would rather have your conversation than learn, and then you fail the exam paper. That's on you, not me. Remember, academics aren't promoted based on how many students pass their courses. They're promoted based on their research, their performance in the research education framework. Was there a point to the Commandanti Megalodon or the class destroyer? They were too late. On the subject of accents, I have a funny story about translating between two English speakers. One from North Africa, one from Philly. Both accents so strong they are mutually unintelligible. Oh, that's fun. Try Geordie accent in Essex. Oh, Leslie, good luck. Steve Clarke, listening to Eric Brown in the interview you can find on YouTube is very insightful. Was that by any chance the new upload by Jamie on Armour Carriers? I have a muddled accent between Long Island and New York, Northern Virginia, and Tidewater. Fun. And then they seem to what utterly useless conversations. That's what I thought. Leslie, you could tell which shipyard on the time the family came from, even if the yards were next to each other. Oh yes, you could, because they each developed a different sing-song because of what my dad used to nickname and we used to talk about was called the yard tunes, because every accent had a different tune, and it was basically he called it the tunes of the yards, and you could tell which yard you were in by the tune going on around you. So if you forgot as a naval architect because you were from, let's say, the naval constructors, and you were going between different yards, you could pick up where you could just listen to the tune and go, hang on, which one's this one? Ah, this one, that one, and you know it. If you want to have a conversation with your mate in class while lecturer speaking, learn sandwich. Or just use WhatsApp. Honestly, you got WhatsApp. Or text. Whatever you want. There's plenty of ways to carry on a silent conversation. I don't care. If you want to sit there staring at your phone for the entire lecture, that's on you. And some people are using their phones to take notes. So, again, there's no way of policing that. And frankly, I'm not going to bother. It's like if people want to record lectures, I don't mind. I go, if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. Record it. Go over it in your own time. That's why I like doing YouTube videos. Because to me, it's recorded lectures. And that means people can go back and watch what they want, when they want, and digest it. As a night to go on, it's the British Samson radars have been designed with global operations in mind, including history and shore ops. They would have been. Would they not have been as seen as inadequate? They would probably not have still performed as well as they'd like to do, but they'd been better. I see. I'm not sure what question you're asking. But if you're asking why you look like that, well, where I was born. In fact, I haven't managed to go to the gym properly in 6 months, and only just got back regularly going to that since COVID for about a month before it started getting iffy again, and then I've had problems with the car and all sorts of things. Need to spend more time in the gym, but I still do my morning press-ups and sit-ups every day, and star jumps and all the calisthenic stuff I do every day. Just that doesn't do much work on my waistline for some reason. I don't know why. For that, I need to spend a good time on the rowing machine, the bike, and the treadmill, and the cross trainer. I just have one of those bodies where it just doesn't go halfways. It's annoying. I'm sorry, I said, what was the point of the Italians designing that class? Well, you design new classes ships as you get information, you design better ones. Trying to build them, they couldn't build them in time, and there's no real point in it. No real point in it other than you do it because you never design. You don't tell the design crews, right, we're going to lose this war, so we might as well send you all home. No, you keep designing your ships because you never know. You might be able to build them, or you might be able to use them, and then you've got a better ship to use. Minnesota, any idea of what percentage of students are active on the channel with lives or previous content? I have an idea of ones who watch, but not really a percentage worked out in my own mind. Leslie, after all, my favourite was the painters in the yards are called slappers. Oh yeah. The Brook, my family is originally from Mahan, but we moved to Texas in the 1970s. My sister has a Texas accent. 5 minutes after we drove, had a Texas accent 5 minutes after we drove over the border. I bet that pleased your mum. Like I don't know, if the US had built the Montana class, do you see DSN keeping them instead of the Hour class post-war? They'll be the newest battleships, so yeah. They'll be the ones kept. You keep the newest ships. You mothball the new ones. They're going to last longer. Honestly, if the Soviet Union had launched some battle cruisers or something in 1946-ish, the US Navy probably would have completed the Montanas. Or a variation of them. And the Royal Navy would have probably completed some version of a Lion. Or maybe another Vanguard. Something like that. Anyway, I'm going to say I am getting messages about Fluffs needing me to go and put them to bed. And as we all know from previous conversations, I have a Corgi who is very, very precise about how he likes to be put to bed and how he likes the curtains to be put and how he likes everything to be arranged. And apparently no one else arranges it quite the same way as I do. Not sure why this is, but apparently this distresses him and he will sit there woofing at it until it's done right. There are various views of what my dog has in terms of personality issues. The fact that he will quite happily go to sleep in my lap at some points, but at other points will be very upset with being in my lap because he wants to go and tell people off for doing naughty things. He is very, very bossy. Thank you, John Shea. Thank you, Ron. Don't forget the street parking. Oh, good lord, don't get me started on the street parking. Only dogs I know who actually will critique people's parking. Seriously, if the car's not parked right outside, we have to close all the curtains in the house so they can't see. Because otherwise they will have... Oh, good lord. So good, they can't use the Ring cameras. If they did, we'd have no trouble. We'd got some trouble. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, DG40. Thank you, Alzowski. Thank you, Steve Clarke. Thank you, Richards. Thank you, Renan. Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Alzowski. Thank you, Rosvonk. Thank you. Nice to run. And if the British had to build a Canada, how they build it? Because their empire was bankrupt and their industry severely damaged. They could afford it in 1945, 1948. You have to remember that it's not that bankrupt and the industries are not that damaged. The problem comes with the transition of industries, and also there's a lot of blame placed on World War II and World War One, but you also have to place some blame on the government decisions in the 1950s and 60s and what is considered cooperative government. Because at a certain point, governments have to govern, not try and balance and win favour with every single special interest, and they did. And I would say the trouble is, at a certain point, from that point, I would say the main trouble is that since Margaret Thatcher, instead of trying to keep every special interest happy, every government of every union has picked favourites and only concentrated on keep them happy. And the reality thing is, if all the special interests are any of the special interests are happy, then you have a problem. They should all be unhappy, but not. They should all be unhappy, but not unhappy about it. If that makes sense, because you want that if If you're giving any special interest enough to make them happy, you're going to make others unhappy and unhappy about it. But if you're giving them the best, doing stuff in the best interest of the country, and you're helping your country get through, and you're working the best of the country, they'll all be unhappy because none of them will be getting what they want, but they'll be getting there'll be enough, and there'll be enough coming along and enough things going in the right direction. They won't be unhappy about it. If that makes sense. Right. Thank you, Nordic Wolf. Thank you, Rabbi Rozak. Thank you to Brooke. Thank you, Ains Morrison, David Golding. Thank you, everyone. Take care and have a nice evening. Thank you for watching. Oh, wrong one. Right. Thank you. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, all my super chats, and thank you for all the super chats and all the memberships, and thank you for all that, because that really does keep the channel going. Thank you very much, and thank you all the admins, Melanie, Jack, Sean, everyone who was on, Paul. Thank you, all the admins. As always, you make my life a lot easier. Thank you very much.